Check it out now. The Funk Soul Brother, check it out now. Out now. The Funk Soul Brother, check it out now. The Funk Soul Brother, check it out now. The Funk Soul Brother, right up. Just want to know if we're live. Yes, we're live. Okay. So we're going to try this again. Take 3, please work. We're going to go live. I hope it works. The last 3 didn't work. Travis sent me a video. Hopefully it's a good one. I'm going to watch it real quick. Hopefully it's a good video.
This motherfucker got me.
Oh, I hate Messenger video player. It's so bad. Messenger needs to fix their video player. Come on. Work. Play.
Me recording outside. Like, what am I? This motherfucker got me recording outside. Like, what am I?
Sounds nice. Sounds nice. Alright, we're going to be watching some videos today. Make sure that's... Okay.
Legend has it that the Muskogee Indians used to race horses at Dry Valley in what is now northern Alabama. The natives referred to the region as Talatigi, or Border Town. Eventually, as American colonists began to settle the surrounding lands, the border of the Native American territory gradually began to shrink. By 1813, Talatigi had become a battleground as the Muskogee erupted in civil war. The Talatigi natives remained loyal to the Americans and helped General Andrew Jackson defeat the Red Sticks, an opposing faction who were fighting to preserve the sovereignty of the Indian Territory. In 1830, President Andrew Jackson would repay the favor by ordering the removal of all indigenous tribes from the southern United States. Disgraced by their compatriots and betrayed by their American allies, the Talatigi Indians abandoned their ancestral lands, never to return. According to legend, as the tribe gazed over Dry Valley for the final time, the shaman cursed the land and all of its future intruders to be struck with misfortune. 130 years later, the president of NASCAR is looking for a new site to construct his most ambitious racetrack yet. After failing to secure a venue in Raleigh or Greenville, Bill France set his sights on a secluded valley in northern Alabama. The town of Talladega was chosen as the location of NASCAR's biggest superspeedway, where, rather than horses, men would race 2-ton hunks of metal at triple-digit speeds. Bill France probably never knew about the curse. Hardly anyone did. But soon enough, in one way or another, all of NASCAR would learn to fear Talladega.
New leader, been waiting all day to say this. It's Ricky Bobby. And it's shaking Big Ten. Ricky Bobby. What sound in 7 seconds?
The inaugural running of a NASCAR race can be something truly special.
I love that Lemon uses
the first
MIDI
Daytona 500 in 1959 immediately cemented the race as NASCAR's most prestigious event. NASCAR's first race at Indianapolis in 1994 was such a spectacle that it attracted more entrants than any other event in the history of the sport. Talladega's inaugural race was also a spectacle, but not for the right reasons.
Hey, I'm Flash. This is an abridged version of my video on what is
likely
the worst NASCAR race in history.
All right, let's listen to him. Or send a video.
I don't know.
if you've heard. The bird is the word. I don't know if you've heard. The bird is the. I don't know if you've heard. The bird
is the word.
I don't know if you've heard. The bird is the word. I don't know if you've heard. The bird is the word.
I might add my vocals to that verse. Because that is funny as hell. I don't know if you heard, the bird is the word. Okay, back to the video.
Be the worst NASCAR race in history, which was the very first race ever held at Talladega. If you want all the nitty-gritty details, the link to the full video is in the description. To say that Talladega's very first event was controversial would be a massive understatement. It was unlike any other race ever held in NASCAR history, and for all the wrong reasons. First, the track was completed dangerously close to opening weekend by design. Bill France had gone into serious debt trying to build this place, and he needs his money back as soon as possible. In August, just a month before race day, Talladega holds its very first tests, and despite topping out at 195 miles per hour, the drivers showed concern very early on. Donnie Allison, a multi-time winner in NASCAR's top division, said, "The track is as rough as a cop. It'd be a beautiful track if it were smooth. The only way they're going to fix it is to repave it." Meanwhile, Kel Yarbrough noticed that his tires were shredded after just a dozen laps on the track. He also noted lots of bumps in the turns. Not exactly something you want to navigate when you're pushing 200 miles an hour in what passed for safety equipment back in the 1960s. NASCAR's two tire manufacturers, Goodyear and Firestone, take note of the tire wear and vow to come back with harder tires to compensate. The first open practice for all teams happens in September on the Wednesday just before the race on Sunday. And that tire issue is not resolved. Guys are noticing chunks of rubber coming off the tires after just a few laps. Goodyear and Firestone fly in harder compounds on Thursday and Friday, but nothing works. Drivers are getting uppity, and by Friday, Firestone backs out, citing safety concerns. The drivers, who just mere weeks ago formed the Professional Drivers Association, a union-like organization, are talking openly of a potential walkout. And the president of the PDA, Richard Petty, the winningest NASCAR driver in history, is in some tense negotiations with Bill France. But the straw that broke the camel's back was one exchange between France and Bobby Allison, who won the most recent race just last week. France says to Bobby, quote, "I think you're just afraid to race." Bobby was taken aback, but it was the quiet Leroy Yarbrough who stepped up from behind him and swung and hit Bill France in the face, knocking him to the ground. Leroy then calmly said to everybody watching, "Boys, pack up your stuff, we're leaving." And just like that, almost every single driver put their cars back on the hauler and left the track, save for 3 holdouts. One, Bobby Isaac, a soft-spoken man who never joined the PDA just because he didn't like the idea of anybody speaking on his behalf. 2, a non-PDA driver named Jim Vandiver driving a car owned by Ray Fox. And 3, a young up-and-comer named Richard Brickhouse. Richard made his very first NASCAR top division start ever just last year at Rockingham. And despite that being his first race on a paved track, he finished 4th. Brickhouse is a PDA driver and plans to walk, but the Dodge factory team pulls him aside and offers him a new ride, the brand new Dodge Charger Daytona, a winged supercar supposedly capable of speed exceeding 200 miles an hour. But this weekend, it won't happen. The tires just can't take it. Brickhouse agrees to the deal and turns scab, leaving the PDA that afternoon. So there it is, a 500-mile race at a 2.66-mile track with just 3 cars in the mix. Bill France offers fans a special deal. If you buy a ticket for the inaugural race at Talladega, you can use that stub to get into the Daytona 500 next year. With a 2-for-1 special that good, people turned out in droves to watch the shit show down in Alabama. But Big Bill has one more trick up his sleeve to make the race just a little less ridiculous. He poaches drivers from the preliminary race on Saturday, the Grand American Series, who race smaller pony cars on the infield road course, not the big track. Instead of Chargers, Chevelles, Torinos, and Roadrunners, they race Camaros, Mustangs, Darts, and even one AMC Javelin. These cars were never intended to drive on a track this big, and they can barely do 160 miles an hour with the wind at their backs. Not to mention, there's no way they could pass tech inspection. These are cars from a completely different series. So, Big Bill France calls an audible and just changes the minimum speed requirements and the inspection templates, all with just a simple wave of the hand. And just in case any driver is thinking of backing out, he offers cash bonuses just to roll off the grid on top of the already stated winnings purse. But with so much tension looming in the air over this slapdash ramshackle affair of a race, the stage is set for a disaster to occur, and it does, but not in the way anybody expected. That tire issue is a result at the 11th hour when Goodyear flies in their last Hail Mary, and those tires finally held up. There wasn't a single tire failure that day. No, what did this race end was one of my favorite parts of old NASCAR racing.
Dale Jr. all the way,
Electronic
baby!
transponders and timing and scoring didn't exist yet, so officials would move placards around on a desk to keep track of all the cars. If the officials agreed on the running order, then it was final. But every once in a while, they'd get it wrong. Well, that happened in this race. That's right, with only 3 cars even being competitive, NASCAR still lost track of Jim Vandiver and Richard Brickhouse, the 2 guys competing for the lead. Bobby Isaac was taking it easy, just worrying about finishing so he could have some easy points to make a run at the championship with all of his competition sitting at home. Richard Brickhouse is declared the winner by NASCAR officials, but Jim Vandiver and his car owner Ray Fox are adamant that they won. And even the radio call with 2-time Cup Series champion Ned Jarrett in the booth thought Jim Vandiver was in the lead. And I think it's worth noting that Jim was driving the older model of Dodge Charger and was not affiliated with Chrysler Corp. Meanwhile, Brickhouse was driving the Dodge factory entry, and it was the first race ever for their new winged wonder car. Rumors persist that the scoring error was not an accident, and Chrysler executives sweet-talked Bill France into manipulating the finish of the race. After all, they kept some of the intrigue for the event by making a big deal about their new car. A lot of people in attendance bought a ticket just because they wanted to see that new Daytona rip around the track at nearly 200 miles an hour. Richard Brickhouse's win stands, and he is absolutely elated with his first career Cup Series win, and is so sure that he'll be tapped to drive the car full-time next year that he uses his winnings to buy a brand new airplane for himself. But unfortunately, he never got the call from Chrysler, or anything for that matter. In a year's time, he was semi-retired and only racing a few times per year. So there it was, a disaster of a race made up mostly of field fillers, a tire scandal resolved at the last possible second, a brand new supercar that nobody got to see the full potential of, and of those 2 competitive cars out there on the track, they were driven by 2 guys nobody had ever heard of, and we're not even sure which one of them actually won the race. If this isn't the worst race in NASCAR history, then I really don't know what would be.
So ends the tale of NASCAR's most disastrous inaugural race, and so begins the tale of the Talladega curse. Over the next half-century, Talladega Super races to ever afflict the sport of stock car racing. The earliest races at the track are possibly the most mysterious. They existed in a time before NASCAR was frequently televised, and most of the footage from this era is either missing or not publicly available. For many incidents during this time, only the stories remain, leaving the rest up to our imagination. The Talladega woes will continue in 1973, which may have been the most tumultuous single year in the history of the track. That year's Winston 500 earned the dubious distinction as the only race in NASCAR's modern era to start with a field of 60 cars, a decision that would immediately backfire on the 9th lap when one car blew an engine and spilled a trail of oil in front of the supersized field. Drivers were instantly sent spinning across the infield grass, kicking up a cloud of smoke and dust that made many wrecked cars impossible to see. When the dust settled, 23 drivers had piled into the wreckage, and the Talladega backstretch now resembled the set of a Mad Max film. Multiple drivers suffered severe injuries, including longtime driver Wendell Scott, who was so badly wounded that he was practically forced into retirement. It was an outright miracle that no one died that day. The following race at Talladega would not be so fortunate. Just 3 months later, teams and drivers would have to pick up the pieces and run it back in the Talladega 500. On lap 13, defending Rookie of the Year Larry Smith struck the turn 1 wall in a single-car incident. Hours later, fans and crew members were shocked to discover that Smith had tragically become Talladega's first fatality. Commentator Ken Squire was perplexed as the accident looked nowhere close to deadly. Smith's fatality was unbeknownst to competitor Bobby Isaac, who would go on to do something even more inexplicable later in the day. Midway through the race, the 1970 champion would impulsively pull his car into the pits. It was at that moment, in the middle of the race, that Bobby Isaac decided to retire from full-time racing. Media outlets at the time reported that Isaac heard a voice in his head which told him to stop racing immediately. After missing the rest of the 1973 season, Isaac would periodically return to the track for a handful of races per year. In 1977, the 45-year-old driver collapsed while exiting his race car and would be pronounced dead the next day from cardiac arrest. At the time, Isaac held the NASCAR record for the fastest lap at Talladega, which he set in 1970. In 1975, racing legend Mark Donohue ran a time trial lap at Talladega with an average speed of 221 miles per hour, setting a closed-circuit world record. Days later, Donohue was fatally wounded from a crash while practicing for the Austrian Grand Prix. On nearly the same day as Donohue's accident, beloved NASCAR driver Tiny Lund was struck and killed after another car collided with his driver's side door on the Talladega backstretch. In less than a decade of operation, Talladega Superspeedway had already been directly or indirectly linked to the deaths of 4 drivers. However, following the death of Tiny Lund, the Speedway spirits will look more kindly on the track's active competitors. To this day, Tiny Lund remains the last driver to lose his life in a NASCAR race at Talladega.
Yep.
While drivers would remarkably be spared on the track, there were never any guarantees inside of it. During the 1975 Winston 500, Richard Petty's car caught fire in the pits. As Petty's brother-in-law, Randy Owens, rushed to douse the flames with a fire hose, the nearby pressurized water tank exploded, launching Owens 15 feet in the air and killing him instantly. In 1977, veteran driver David Sisko was competing at Talladega when he was greeted by a terrible sight in the infield. His mother had been struck and killed by a pickup truck near the garage area. Sisko was apparently so devastated that he would never attempt another NASCAR race. Unbelievably, this wouldn't be the last pickup truck-related death at Talladega. In 1996, the president of ARCA was T-boned in the parking lot and would later go on to die from his injuries.
Oh, I got a punt. Ad time. Gotta skip. Right as I got a punt, too. So I was winning the game, and I'm still winning the game. We're going to be watching a video on Talladega, and then one on Dale Earnhardt. Just a bunch of videos today.
Along with its string of inexplicable tragedy, the early days of Talladega also housed some of the most bizarre mysteries that stock car racing has ever known. On the morning of the 1974 Talladega 500, crew members awoke to an unnerving development. The race cars of nearly a dozen drivers had been sabotaged. Teams inspected their vehicles and discovered slashed tires, cut oil lines, and gas tanks filled with sand. The extent of the sabotage was only fully realized during the race, as many drivers began experiencing mechanical failures as soon as they hit the track. Miraculously, no drivers were injured in the fiasco, but sabotaging so many race cars at a track as fast as Talladega was practically attempted mass murder. Authorities launched an immediate investigation to find the perpetrator, but were unable to identify even a single suspect. Whoever sabotaged the cars did not leave a trace of evidence, and to this day, the Talladega Tamperer remains at large. Following the worst vehicular sabotage in NASCAR history, the track amped up security for future events. And while they succeeded at keeping future delinquents out of the garage, they didn't think to check whether one could wind up behind the wheel. Prior to the 1982 Winston 500, a few drivers expressed confusion at an unfamiliar name on the entry list for the race. A man by the name of L.W. Wright had purchased a race car for $20,000, which he entered in that week's race at Talladega. Despite claiming to be a seasoned stock car racing veteran, no other driver had ever heard of him. However, in an age before detailed record-keeping, it was somewhat plausible that a driver could have honed their skills in some middle-of-nowhere town. The mysterious driver managed to qualify for the race, despite wrecking his car on just the second lap around the track. As the crew was repairing the car for race day, Wright seemed unable to answer basic questions that any driver should have known. Suspicion aside, Wright managed to line up for Sunday's race and take the green flag. Immediately, it was clear that the number 34 Chevrolet was dangerously off the pace. Wright was quickly lapped by the leaders and was ordered by NASCAR to retire from the race.
So L.W. Wright again given the black flag as he passes by us, and Wright has been ordered to the pit area.
After pulling into the pits, Wright got out of his car, slipped into the infield, and was never seen again. It turned out that L.W. Wright was an imposter and had conned investors out of nearly $50,000 so that he could race alongside NASCAR's biggest stars. To this day, the true identity of L.W. Wright remains unknown. His alias persists as one name in the NASCAR record books that may always be shrouded in mystery. After letting what was essentially an average Joe, NASCAR would tighten up their standards for who exactly was allowed on the track. However, while paying more scrutiny to the drivers in the race cars, there was one other car they forgot about.
Well, the pace car, we understand, has been stolen. The officials are not driving this thing, and somebody has actually gotten in the pace car and stole it.
At the 1986 Boston 500, 20-year-old Darren Crowder stole the pace car that had been left unoccupied on pit road. He completed a full circuit at over 100 miles per hour before the police set up a blockade and took him into custody. During the whole bewildering spectacle, the crowd of 133,000 fans cheered wildly. Growing up, we're all told to respect the law of the land, but sometimes you just gotta root for the rebel. After the Muskogee Indians were forced to vacate their lands, most obeyed the order and subjected themselves to the infamous Trail of Tears. Some of the natives, however, refused to go west to the Indian Territory and instead chose to keep their destiny in their own hands. A few Muskogee turned their sights instead towards the south, in the mostly uninhabited territory of Florida. The subtropical peninsula had become known as a safe haven for refugees of the expanding American Empire. Together with various other displaced natives and escaped African slaves, the remnants of the Muskogee would integrate into a new tribe, the Seminole. Although they too were forced to abandon their way of life like all the others, at the very least, for the time being, they were free.
It was a crazy
In 1819, Spain ceded the Florida Territory to the United States, and concerns of relocation immediately returned.
But I'm pretty sure
although the Seminole briefly received a reservation on the peninsula, it wouldn't be long until the federal government once again demanded they move out west. After already sacrificing so much, the Seminole refused to budge. And after Chief Osceola shot and killed federal agent Wiley Thompson, they found themselves at war with the might of the U.S. military. As the American troops marched into Florida, the Seminole warriors would soon be outnumbered by as much as 10-1. Needless to say, they were heavy underdogs.
The Palisades is going to make a move. He's going to have to do it now. He cannot do it. Bill Parsons is going to win his first Winston Cup race. There's the checkered flag.
Talladega Superspeedway has always been unusually favorable to underdogs. The relative ease with which drivers can navigate the track opens the door for the occasional David to contend with NASCAR's Goliath. In addition to the fluke win of Richard Brickhouse in the inaugural race, 5 other drivers would score their one and only career victory in the first 20 years of competition at Talladega, by far the most of any track in the sport. In the early days of the track, winning at Talladega was a matter of endurance. Completing 500 miles at the longest circuit in the sport was a daunting task for even the most dominant race teams. Putting yourself in position to win was often as simple as overcoming the attrition of your competitors. Eventually, most teams figured out how to make their machines go the distance, and the name of the game shifted to speed. In spite of its many trials and tribulations, Talladega Superspeedway has always managed to draw in fans for one simple reason. There's no other place on Earth where you can witness so many cars go so fast.
Yep.
The track's 33-degree corners allow drivers to maintain incredible momentum throughout the circuit. Talladega may be the only track in all of racing where you can complete an entire lap without ever touching the brake pedal. The colossal oval is capable of producing such extreme speeds that most motorsports don't feel comfortable racing on it.
300 miles
In
an hour at
1980,
Talladega.
IndyCar had plans for a Talladega race. They would soon scrap the idea forever after it became clear that the cars would be moving so fast that any accident essentially meant certain death. Stock cars are considerably slower than open-wheel cars, but soon enough, they too would begin approaching the danger zone. Bobby Isaac managed to break the 200-mile-per-hour barrier as early as 1970, but rule changes to the cars brought speeds down to the 180s for most of the decade.
But you could theoretically
Gradually,
reach
though,
300
speeds
miles
began
an
to
hour
creep back
at
up,
Talladega.
and in 1982, Benny Parsons would once again reach 200, becoming the first NASCAR driver to eclipse the mark in a qualifying lap. 1 year later, Cale Yarborough would reach 202, surpassing Bobby Isaac's 13-year-old record. 1985 would mark the arrival of the fastest man in NASCAR history, Bill Elliott, who would qualify for the Winston 500 with a monster lap of 209 miles per hour. Elliott's car was so much faster than the competition that after a ruptured oil pump forced him into the pits, Elliott would overcome a 5-mile deficit under green to retake the lead by the end of the race. Even after burning several minutes on pit road, Elliott had just ran the fastest race in NASCAR history, completing 500 miles in just over 2 hours and 41 minutes. 2 years later, Bill Elliott would complete a 2 2/3 mile lap at Talladega in under 45 seconds, setting an average speed of 212.8 miles per hour. It was at this point that the entire sport of stock car racing would discover that they had ventured too far into unwelcome territory.
Talladega, it means speed, it means competition, and speed's certainly something we've seen a lot of this weekend, Larry.
8 drivers exceeded 210 miles per hour.
The identical front row as last year, Bill Elliott on the pole and Bobby Allison alongside.
I think
Bobby Allison spent a brief period as NASCAR's most popular driver, and at Talladega, the Alabama-born racing legend was always a fan favorite. On May 3rd, 1987, Bobby Allison came inches away from becoming one with the fans.
Oh, we have a problem. Bobby Allison with a horrible crash here on the front stretch. It has torn out a complete section of protective railing.
I love
After a mechanical failure sent his car spinning down the tri-oval, Bobby Allison found himself at the center of the most frightening near miss in NASCAR history. The Talladega pace had become so fast that even a slight aberration was enough to transform any of the 40 vehicles on track into a 2-ton projectile. Just as everyone was starting to forget about the Talladega curse, the track would produce an incident so ominous that it would fundamentally alter the future of stock car racing. One may consider it benevolent of the curse to spare everyone on that day, but the story of Talladega's most dangerous race doesn't end here. Following Bobby Allison's spine-chilling accident, the fastest field in NASCAR history would be conquered by the heir to the Allison throne, Davey Allison, who scored his first career victory on the same day that his father cheated death.
Pretty good at this game.
6 years later, fate would repay the favor.
A sad note in sports today. Stock car racer Davey Allison died this morning after the helicopter he was piloting crashed yesterday in the infield of Talladega Speedway down in Alabama. Davey Allison, a great champion and a good friend of ours, was 32.
Although his life and career were cut tragically short, Davey Allison's legacy will always be etched in the 1987 Winston 500, possibly the most influential single race in NASCAR.
Oh, now's an ad. An ad for Suno, which I have. Suno's pretty cool. Basically, you can make songs with AI. It's really cool.
87 Winston 500, possibly the most influential single race in NASCAR history. Bill Elliott would become the last NASCAR driver to ever reach the 212. A new component to the intake manifold designed to limit horsepower and keep speeds under 200 miles per hour. This thin metal plate would completely change the game and spawn a form of racing so sensationally unique that no other motorsport in the world even comes close to replicating it. Plate racing takes traditional racing technique and turns it on its head. It's a format that can allow the 30th place car to be within 2 seconds of the leader, featuring lap after lap of 3 wide traffic. Rather than raw driving ability, winning a restrictor plate race relies on the driver's patience, timing, and decision-making. Compared to the spectacular displays of speed in the past, Talladega racing would now resemble a high-velocity game of chess. Restrictor plates would usher in a new era of NASCAR, and along with it, a new era of mayhem.
Wow. Oh, not what you want to see out of your windshield.
Oh my gosh!
Oh, that
Racing was intended to make the sport safer. Super speedways arguably became more treacherous than ever before. The frequency of wrecks skyrocketed as drivers now had far less margin for error in the close quarters traffic. With so many opportunities for calamity, the drivers would start discovering inconceivable methods to wreck a race car. Talladega had always been a place that pushed the limits of what was possible on a NASCAR track, and the early 90s saw a remarkable string of accidents where drivers would test the literal limits of the track. The 1993 Die Hard 500 was NASCAR's first race at Talladega after the death of Davey Allison. The event would be remembered most for 2 harrowing incidents. On lap 69, rookie driver Stanley Smith would suffer a head-on collision into the Turn 1 wall. The accident eerily occurred in the same part of the track as Larry Smith's fatal crash almost 20 years to the day after the tragedy. Stanley Smith would manage to survive, but with catastrophic injuries that would end his racing career entirely. However, despite involving a driver nearly losing his life, this accident is most well known for something that had not happened in a NASCAR race in a quarter century.
There is one car that has gone over the wall, as you see in that. I can't remember the last time we saw a car out of the speedway yet. No, I can't either.
Jimmy Horton's number 32 Chevy had left the racetrack. The accident compelled NASCAR to install a catch fence in the Talladega corners. The new enclosure would come in handy just 3 years later, as it prevented Ricky Craven's car from also exiting the circuit in a similar crash. However, back in the 93 Die Hard 500, the mayhem was only half over. On lap 132, Neil Bonnett's car was sent tumbling into the triable catch fence. Thankfully, after Bobby Allison's accident, NASCAR had strongly reinforced the line between the spectators and the action, narrowly escaping yet another tragedy. While it came very close, this Die Hard 500 did not live up to its moniker. The event would go on to be remembered as the race where cars seemingly refused to stay inside the track. The next time the Cup Series returned to Talladega, Mark Martin would discover the true meaning of going inside the track. Once again, NASCAR would have to make some modifications. Talladega has the strange ability to send cars in seemingly any direction. In a few cases, that direction would be up.
Is he going to win the Winston 500? They come through the tri-oval. Checkered is waving. Ernie Evans wins, and Rusty Smith and gets airborne.
The blowover is one of the most ethereal moments that any racing fan can witness. We all know cars as some of the heaviest objects we interact with on a regular basis.
We don't always have
Most of us would have to use all of our strength to get them to budge a single inch. And to think that something as light as air could be powerful enough to lift a 2-ton machine off the earth, well, you just have to see it to believe it. At the speeds NASCAR drivers travel at Talladega, it happens more often than you guess.
I love the sound.
Darrell, 737, of course, it's designed to take off, but it will take off at, 160-some miles an hour. These cars are running 185, and the roof flaps do their job to keep that car from getting way up in the air.
That was awful.
Wow.
In 1996, the Talladega curse finally caught up to Bill Elliott, who suffered a broken leg after his car soared across the backstretch grass. But the most spectacular blowover in Talladega history belongs to a different Elliott.
Over once and a half and on his roof.
In 2003, Elliott Sadler would get over a full second of airtime as his car executed a near-flawless pirouette. The number 38 M&M's Ford must have covered the length of a football field without touching the ground. The following season, Sadler returned to Talladega and inexplicably became the only driver in history to blow over at the same track 2 years in a row, this time finishing the race in style.
He said he wanted to finish this race with all 4 tires on the ground. He did. But he just didn't keep them there the whole time.
Oh, it's gonna... No ad. I thought I was gonna play an ad. He keeps cutting back.
It's one thing to watch a blowover as a spectator, but to experience one from inside a race car is a sensation most of us can only imagine. A NASCAR engine can roar as loud as 140 decibels, but in an airborne car, many drivers report a brief moment when everything falls silent. At the instant in which the mighty racing machine is briefly wrestled away from the dominion of gravity, it's as if the driver has entered the window to another realm. Do you think that if they listened hard enough, they would hear the faint thumping of horses galloping on the Alabama clay? Of course, in moments like these, most drivers have other things to worry about.
Oh, there goes the 18! The 62 upside down!
Ever since Bobby Allison's accident, NASCAR has been continually trying to eliminate the blowover, but try as they might, Talladega has always found a way to send cars flying.
Oh, Logano gets turned! Logano is upside down!
Whenever
While more blowovers happen at Talladega than anywhere else, the track's most iconic accidents are of a far different breed. Ever since restrictor plates introduced the age of pack racing, there's been a monster lurking in every superspeedway race. It's the reason why most drivers, teams, and owners dread Talladega Sunday.
Oh, Kyle caught up. Whoa, Beal accordion's back. Whoa, man. Trouble. Stewart in the wall. Here we go. Here we go. Robbie Gordon at the 33. Harvick is around. Here we go, guys. The big one.
They call it the Big One, a massive pileup that can wipe out more than a dozen cars in the blink of an eye. Talladega may have the most room of any NASCAR track, but when the Big One strikes, drivers often find themselves with nowhere to go. It can happen anywhere at any time. All it takes is for one driver to make one mistake. It's as simple as someone mistiming a block, sticking their nose in a gap too small, or inexplicably rejoining the pack at half speed. Whatever the cause, the outcome remains the same. Multiple drivers' days are ended by something they had no way of preventing. Modern-day NASCAR fields race with around 40 cars. Throughout the 90s, it was not uncommon for the Big One to involve 10 or more cars, about a quarter of the field.
NASCAR
By the 2000s, the accidents started to become truly enormous. The 2002, 2003, and 2005 Talladega Spring races each saw a pileup involving more than 20 drivers, with the 03 race consuming a Cup Series record 27 cars. However, the largest wreck in modern NASCAR history would happen at a Talladega race in what is now the NASCAR Xfinity Series. The division is essentially NASCAR's minor league, and in the 2002 Aaron's 312, inexperience would contribute to the mother of all pileups. On lap 14, Johnny Sauter's blue Chevy slid sideways and started tumbling in front of the entire field. Drivers began swerving into each other to avoid the carnage and quickly blocked the track. When it was all said and done, 31 cars were collected, nearly 3/4 of the entire field. Out of the few survivors, most would fall off the pace with mechanical issues. The race eventually boiled down to just 2 competitive cars, a scenario that may never occur in another NASCAR race. While Talladega races have increasingly turned into wreck fests, it's curious to consider that when it so desires, NASCAR's most feared track is capable of leaving everyone unscathed. The 1997 Winston 500 was the first race in Talladega history to run caution-free. After crashing into the infield just 3 years prior, Mark Martin would break Bill Elliott's record for the fastest NASCAR race, completing 500 miles in 2 hours and 39 minutes. In the following 5 seasons, 2 more Talladega races would run caution-free. As of now, it's the last track in NASCAR history to ever achieve this feat. It really makes you wonder, does Talladega create the mayhem, or do we?
Up, ad time. Come on, let me skip it. 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 Let me skip it.
We saw a lot of communication on that restart of that first initial start with the Stewart-Haas teams all working together to get in line on the front. You see them. They're pulling away, Jeff.
Let's show you how far this first group of Stewart-Haas Racing has driven away.
When everyone chooses to cooperate, we are capable of achieving remarkable things.
Yep.
In an ideal world, we could do anything caution-free. But there's a reason why idealism is so hopelessly fragile. While it takes everyone to avoid destruction, it only takes one to create it.
True.
As is the case with most things in America, the best you can do is survive.
What you got ain't nothing new.
We've ever known, we still run out of room. Americans have always been infatuated with the concept of manifest destiny, the 19th century ideal that the United States should inevitably span from sea to shining sea. This grand vision of America was eventually realized at tremendous expense to those who originally roamed those lands. Even now, as we sit atop our New York skyscrapers and California mansions, manifest destiny is still very much alive. We apply it to what we wear, what we drive, how we conduct business.
How we think.
Enough is never enough. We are always marching forward to some glorious, indeterminate outcome. Why stop at building the biggest racetrack in the world when you can build one even bigger, steeper, wider, and faster? Our conquest for more never ends. Some call it greed, others call it destiny. The driver's strike at Talladega's inaugural contest gave many others a unique opportunity to race in the Cup Series. One of those newcomers was a 23-year-old Richard Childress, who would use the prize money from his big break to open up his own racing team. In 1981, Childress retired from racing and handed over the reins of his number 3 car to NASCAR's newest champion, a driver by the name of Dale Earnhardt.
Who we'll get into.
With Richard Childress racing, Earnhardt would go on to win 6 of his 7 Cup championships, and the Childress number 3 would become the most iconic stock car of the 20th century. Earnhardt's career will always be most intertwined with Daytona, but one of his most impressive feats was coming the closest of anyone to conquering Talladega. Despite hating restrictor play racing more so than any other driver, Earnhardt was undeniably the best at it. He was so skilled at drafting that some competitors swore that he could literally see the air coming off the cars. In October 2000, Talladega would be the site of his final career victory. In possibly the most impressive display of racing mastery the sport had ever seen, Earnhardt would charge from 17th to 1st in the final laps to become a 10-time Talladega winner, by far the most of any driver. He may have won even more, but well, you know what tends to happen when someone comes close to conquering Talladega.
This is undoubtedly one of the toughest announcements that I've ever personally had to make. But after the accident in turn 4 at the end of the Daytona 500, we've lost Dale Earnhardt.
The white flag is up. Final lap at Talladega. Who's it going to be? Labonte, Earnhardt Jr., Stewart, or maybe somebody out of the back? Look at this move by Jr. at the white flag.
After suffering such terrible loss, the Talladega spirits would shine favorably on Dale Earnhardt Jr., who would immediately carry on his father's legacy. 1 year after Dale Sr.'s final victory, Dale Jr. would score his first Talladega victory, one of 4 wins in a row at the track for the new Pied Piper of superspeedway racing. Dale Jr.'s remarkable success on NASCAR's biggest stage would make him an instant fan favorite. The newest racing superstar would carry both Talladega and the sport into its present-day incarnation.
Hey, Ricky, Bobby. Good to see you again. You still owe me that $30.
Oh no, man, you said that was a gift.
You're a dirty liar.
By now, Talladega had become so infamous in pop culture that someone was bound to make a movie about it. 2006 saw the release of the Will Ferrell comedy Talladega Nights, a film that features a winless driver growing resentful of his more successful teammate. Strangely enough, in NASCAR's first race at Talladega after the film's release, a near-identical storyline would play out in reality. Back in the 2006 Daytona 500, Brian Vickers is leading with just 15 laps to go and has a chance to score his first career victory in the biggest race of the year. Unfortunately for Brian, his teammate Jimmy Johnson passes him and goes on to win instead. 2 months later at the spring Talladega race, Vickers once again has an opportunity to get his first win.
Now, will Vickers be the good soldier and follow Jeff Gordon home, or does he want his first win that bad? He's got to get his first win.
He takes the lead with just 2 laps to go, only to get passed once again by Jimmy Johnson. Later in the year, the Hendrick teammates return to Talladega to find themselves nose to tail behind Dale Jr. in the closing laps. Both Johnson and Jr. are in a tight championship battle, and it's up to Vickers to help his teammate complete the pass for the win. What happened next wasn't exactly a shake and bake. Talladega has always been known for its sensational finishes. Since 1980, about a third of all Talladega races have ended in a last lap pass. Such a scenario is portrayed to great effect in Talladega Nights, which makes use of the track's most distinct feature. While most tracks are designed with the finish line in the center of the front straightaway, Talladega's is about 1,000 feet farther down the track towards the entrance of Turn 1. While it may seem like a small alteration, this unique design aspect has affected the outcomes of countless races. It's amazing what can happen if you leave someone with just a little more room to run. The name Seminole can be traced back to the Spanish word cimarron, or runaway. They were a tribe composed of wildly different people who all shared a single unifying vision, a refusal to be conquered. The Seminole warriors fought valiantly. They pushed the U.S. military to the most challenging and expensive conflict with any indigenous group in the nation's history. However, eventually, the Seminole losses had become catastrophic, and they simply couldn't outlast the overwhelming resources of the United States. One by one, the Seminole chiefs were captured and forced to surrender. By 1843, nearly the entire Seminole tribe were forcibly relocated to the Creek Reservation in Oklahoma. Only a small fraction managed to evade government capture by fleeing into the Everglades, a vast stretch of swampy wilderness considered by American settlers to be inhospitable. After nearly a decade of costly fighting, the military decided that further pursuit was no longer worth the trouble. By the end of the war, as few as 100 Seminoles remained, the last of the runaways. Throughout the rest of the 19th century, all of the other indigenous people in America would be forced to submit to government rule. Eventually, the Everglades Seminoles would remain as the last free tribe within U.S. territory. Despite all of their power and might, America could never conquer the Seminole people. There are some things in this world that you simply cannot control. Since its very first race, NASCAR has always struggled to control Talladega. The track has served as the ultimate fulcrum for the sport's greatest conflict of interest. By creating the world's most spectacular track, they simultaneously created the world's most dangerous track. NASCAR has always straddled the fine line between entertainment and safety. Throughout the history of the track, the sanctioning body has been in a constant balancing act in trying to prevent the next Talladega catastrophe while maintaining the track's unique appeal. The continual addition of rules and regulations has resulted in a style of racing that looks completely unrecognizable to the sport's humble beginnings.
And I mean, guys were slamming into one another, they're hitting each other in the corner. Eventually, just what happened is going to happen. It's going to happen again, too, probably before the day's over.
Many drivers today feel that Talladega racing is a glorified crapshoot, which is somewhat emblematic of modern NASCAR as a whole.
You know, look, these championships aren't like winning like Petty and Earnhardt used to win them. And, you know, it comes down to one race, and it came down to one race for us tonight and came up short.
How far are we willing to compromise the merit of competition to manufacture a more entertaining spectator product? NASCAR is always trying to tweak the sport to make races more exciting.
Yes.
But there comes a point where all the micromanagement becomes counterproductive.
It's idiotic to be out here doing this anyway. Trying to put on some cute show for whatever the hell this is. It's stupid. There's no sense in doing this.
One of the most defining aspects of present-day Talladega has been the looming threat of controversy, where NASCAR's contrived bureaucracy ends up spoiling the race itself. In 2003, NASCAR would end its policy of allowing drivers to race back to the caution flag, as the practice was becoming too dangerous. Instead, the field would be frozen at the moment of caution, a change that would reach a breaking point the next spring at Talladega. When the caution came out with 5 laps to go, fans were thrilled as Dale Jr. appeared to make the pass for the lead. However, the lead was instead awarded to Jeff Gordon, as he was slightly ahead at the exact moment of caution. The race would not be restarted as Gordon would coast to a very unpopular win, as frustrated fans pelted the track with debris. NASCAR would later institute the green-white checker rule to minimize the chances of races ending under caution, a policy that has since undergone numerous confusing and inconsistent changes over the years. One of the most baffling officiating decisions for any NASCAR finish happened at the 2016 Xfinity Series race at Talladega. At first, it looked to be an amazing feel-good story with underdog driver Brennan Poole threading the needle to score his first NASCAR win. However, in an unprecedented reversal, NASCAR would award the victory instead to Elliott Sadler. The officials had bizarrely frozen the field less than 1,000 feet from the finish line, and in that instant, Sadler's car was briefly in the lead, despite being in the process of crashing. To this day, Brennan Poole is still searching for his first win.
And by that much, Elliott Sadler, a winner over Brennan Poole at Talladega.
Not even NASCAR's biggest stars can avoid the jinx of Talladega controversy.
Dale Earnhardt Jr. looking for his 5th win at Talladega.
Later in the 04 season, Dale Jr. would avenge his dubious runner-up finish by winning the fall Talladega race, only to once again wind up at odds with the sanctioning body. In his victory lane interview, Jr. would drop an expletive on live TV.
What does it mean to win here, not only once, but to win here 5 times?
Well, it don't mean shit right now. Daddy's done won here 10 times, so...
A mistake that would normally be a non-issue, but it just so happened that this was the year of Janet Jackson's wardrobe malfunction at the Super Bowl, and networks at the time were hyper-vigilant at maintaining their standards and practices. As a result, Jr. would be docked 25 driver points, which knocked him out of the championship lead. 2004 was the best season of Jr.'s career, and he may very well have won the title if all of us weren't so sensitive over a 4-letter word.
So the chase for the championship is over, and here's how it ended up.
2004 also marked the beginning of NASCAR's chase for the Cup, which eventually morphed into what we now know as the controversial NASCAR playoffs. The 2014-16 incarnation of the playoffs was very likely the most busted and unfair championship format in the history of motorsports. In October 2015, the system would be painfully exposed at where else but Talladega. This era decided to make Talladega a cutoff race for the next round, meaning that some drivers would be forced to do whatever they could to avoid elimination. On the final restart, Kevin Harvick has a serious mechanical issue. He can barely keep up at pace car speed and is practically guaranteed to get eliminated unless he does something dire. So, with no other conceivable way to save his season, Harvick swerves into the car beside him and causes a 10-car pileup. The caution comes out, Harvick coasts to the finish line and advances to the next round in quite possibly the worst NASCAR finish in the past decade.
You can hardly blame a guy for doing it. He's either going to make it if he does that and wreck some people going slow, or he's not going to make it if it goes green for 2 laps. But I don't know. It just feels like we kind of lost control on this situation.
You know, look, these championships aren't like winning like Petty and Earnhardt used to win them.
Modern-day NASCAR is always throwing curveballs, and drivers will adapt to do whatever gets them closer to winning. One of the most peculiar changes in superspeedway strategy was the brief rise of tandem drafting. Following the release of NASCAR's Car of Tomorrow, drivers began to realize that the flat-nose design allowed the cars to lock bumpers at tracks like Talladega and gain an extra boost in speed. The tandem era would truly begin at the 2010 Aaron's 499, a race that saw a record 88 lead changes. By the next season, drivers had mastered the tandem, leading to one of the most unbelievable finishes of all time.
They're 3 wide, 3 by 3 on the line. Johnson, maybe Jimmy Johnson.
In a mad dash to the finish line with 8 cars under a blanket, Jimmy Johnson would edge out the win by 2 1/1000ths of a second, tied for the closest finish in NASCAR history. However, during its brief stint, tandem drafting represented too extreme of a departure from what audiences were used to, and NASCAR would eliminate the strategy in the following season. While tandem drafting was relatively unpopular in its time, many fans today look back on the era fondly. What has never been viewed fondly is the single most despised policy that NASCAR has ever implemented, the yellow line rule.
Kenny, I hate to deliver bad news, but they're telling me that they're going to drop you back to 21st for dropping under the yellow line.
I went underneath Sterling, right? I was underneath him. He turned left. What the hell am I going to do? He run me in the yellow line. So I finished 5th today. I know that. So hell, whatever the hell they want to do.
The death of Dale Earnhardt convinced NASCAR to implement a variety of new safety measures. Most of these ended up being extremely beneficial, but one change, the yellow line rule, has plagued superspeedway races ever since. In an attempt to reduce the number of accidents, NASCAR started penalizing drivers for passing on the apron of the straightaways, which they now marked as out of bounds with a double yellow line. Despite their good intentions, this change was a prime example of NASCAR trying to outsmart the room by adding a needlessly complicated judgment call to what was a self-policing issue.
Here comes Junior, he's got to run. Kenseth tried to close him up. It's going to be borderline, guys. It's going to be borderline. Boy, I don't know. That was a pass under the line. I don't know what we're going to see here. It would be very unpopular to black flag it.
In 2003, Dale Jr. was not penalized on this pass for the win. 5 years later, Regan Smith would not be so fortunate after he was forced below the line while passing Tony Stewart for the win.
They are saying Tony Stewart has won the race. Tony Stewart is the official winner here at Talladega. They will not allow that pass below the yellow line.
That's what I was going with. I got forced down there, man. I had a nose inside of them, and I could have piled up the whole field, and I guess that would have been a cooler finish. I don't know, but I always got told that the rule is if you get forced down there, then you're the winner of the race.
Even as recently as last year, NASCAR still has seemingly no idea how to actually enforce the rule, as Denny Hamlin went way below the line on this pass for the win and wasn't penalized.
NASCAR has said the 11 is the winner.
Since its inception, countless great moments have been tainted by the perpetual asterisk which the yellow line rule creates. And the worst part is, there's no evidence to suggest that the rule has had any effect on its intended purpose of preventing accidents. If anything, the rule has contributed to an increase in accidents, as it effectively constricts more cars within a narrower space.
Yeah, I got a great idea for everybody. How about we just get rid of the yellow line rule? Nobody really wants to see the races come down to these type of decisions, and I don't think it's going to crash more cars than we crashed today.
Recent races at Talladega have been about as close as you can get to a demolition derby. It's not uncommon these days for a race to end with less than a dozen cars limping across the finish line. Over the past 2 decades, NASCAR has made incredible strides in safety, an unintended consequence of which was ushering in a new generation of drivers who no longer fear accidents. Back in the day, drivers were forced to use restraint on the track because the consequence of wrecking would be potentially inflicting serious injury on yourself or others. Today, drivers are mostly free to take unthinkable risks on track and walk away from any mayhem completely unharmed. Twice a year now, drivers start a race at Talladega knowing that they most likely won't make it to the finish.
Sorry we couldn't crash more cars today. We didn't fill the quota for today for Talladega and NASCAR. If we haven't crashed at least 50% of the field by the end of the race, we need to extend the race till we at least crash 50% of the cars.
This is Talladega, and this is the Talladega curse. All the way back in 1969, we didn't just construct a racetrack. We constructed a monument to mankind's arrogance. We created something that we can never truly conquer, so that we can spend eternity chasing our endless desire for more. No matter how fast we follow them, all roads at Talladega eventually lead to destruction, misfortune, and controversy. The state of Alabama carries with it a hauntingly somber past. It has been the epicenter of some of the most unforgivable sins that we as a nation have ever committed. A history that's stained as red as the clay on which it all lies. And unlike clay, the mistakes of our past will never wash out. They follow us as painful echoes from a faraway time that's somehow still too close to us. We can never unhear them, but maybe if we get enough race cars together in one place, we can drown them out, even if it's just for a few hours at a time.
I have a 99 overall.
William Faulkner once put it,
can you say the same?
Between grief and nothing, I will take grief.
People always ask me why I watch NASCAR, why I enjoy something riddled with so many imperfections. And to that, I simply answer that we can design the perfect race car, but we can never design the perfect driver. Talladega may not be the greatest display of racing, but it is the greatest display of humanity. It's a racetrack where speed, skill, and machinery no longer matter. It's a venue that only seems to grow more prosperous through its legacy of disaster. It's a battleground where the mistakes of the few are destined to end the journeys of the many. The only place in all of racing that produces no winners, only survivors.
I think Kyle's trying to cross the start-finish line, don't you think?
Yeah, I believe he is.
He wants to finish.
He's going to do it.
There it is. All right.
You go this far, you don't want to be one lap short.
Every year on NASCAR's schedule, there are 2 dates that I never forget to tune in. When America's greatest drivers are confronted with the track they host. In the land that America's native people once called home, 40 race cars are cursed to reenact their story.
That must be at least 30 cars in that wreck. God help all of
them. Seminole bided their time in the Everglades for more than 100 years. They emerged in an America that had grown rich off the lands they had claimed long ago. An America that was now looking to move on. Tribe was granted federal recognition by the U.S. government, extending them special privileges as a sovereign jurisdiction. By the 1970s, the Seminole had begun using these privileges to host high-stakes bingo halls, which would go on to be the very first Indian casinos. While most of the Seminole tribe gradually integrated into modern society, a small part would continue their traditional way of life in the Everglades. This group would go on to form a new tribe, known as the Miccosukee. In 2002, the Miccosukee tribe was looking to advertise their new casino and turn to the world of NASCAR. 7 years later, the Miccosukee car would be the centerpiece of the most unbelievable moment in Talladega history. It's April 26, 2009. Americans are reeling from the struggles of the Great Recession. And on this Sunday afternoon, a few of them turn on the NASCAR Cup Series race at Talladega.
Well, gotta charge my phone real quick. Hold up. Don't mind me. The Dale Earnhardt video will be playing soon. Believe me, it's true. Dale Earnhardt. I'm gonna look it up real quick. Dale Earnhardt and Lemon. Might as well look it up. There it is.
The recession. And on this Sunday afternoon, a few of them turn on the NASCAR Cup Series race at Talladega, hoping to witness something incredible. In this race, they see big pileups, close racing, and bizarre oddities that only Talladega can seem to produce. With just 2 laps left, the audience sees something truly unprecedented. The 99 car of Carl Edwards rockets into the lead and starts pulling away from the pack. He's being pushed by a car no one has paid any mind to all day, the Miccosukee car, driven by rookie Brad Keselowski. After 7 years in the sport, the Miccosukee team has never won a Cup Series race. Their best opportunity to do so is now resting on the shoulders of a driver making just his 5th career start. Going into today, there's such long shots to win that odds makers didn't even bother listing them. However, with just one lap to go, the Mikasuki car has just one driver standing in its way of glory. The tandem are pursued by the Army and National Guard cars, but they're not going to catch him. Keselowski pushes Edwards to the home stretch. He looks high, then he looks low, as Edwards swerves down to block. Keselowski is forced all the way down to the double yellow line. He thinks about what happened to Regan Smith the year prior. He knows that if he goes below that line, it's game over. The Mikasuki car has been forced as far down as it can possibly run. It can go no further. It has been given no choice but to stand its ground.
Can Keselowski try to win it?
I don't think he can step out until he waits till the last. Is Edwards going?
That's the video. And now you know the whole story.
BetMGM Casino. Jackpots, so many. BetMGM Casino. New DraftKings Casino players.
Wrestling, a form of entertainment that disguises itself as a sport. In this
ago,
episode, I'm going to talk about NASCAR, a sport which tries to disguise itself as entertaining. Today, NASCAR's Monster Energy Cup Series tours around the country racing in front of mostly empty arenas as sponsorships and television ratings continue to wane. At least with professional wrestling, while not many fans enjoy it anymore, there's still at least a small nucleus of people that still care about it. It's nearly impossible to find anyone these days who actually cares about NASCAR.
Hold on, I'm going to give my best NASCAR noise impression.
Most people, upon hearing the name NASCAR, immediately think of a dumb sport where dumb rednecks watch cars go around in circles. But I'm here to tell you that's wrong. The cars actually go around in ovals. In all seriousness, though, it ain't easy being a NASCAR fan. It ain't easy having to constantly justify to people why you like something that's about as popular as licorice. There was once a time when many more people liked NASCAR, but that time has long since passed. The vacuous boredom often associated with the sport today has paradoxically created intrigue for reasons why anyone would even like it in the first place. Trying to convince anybody to actually care about NASCAR is a pretty tall order, but that won't stop me from trying. Because there's one driver in the sport's turbulent history that truly embodies all of the reasons why NASCAR was, at one time, the second most popular sport in America. This is the story of Dale Earnhardt.
I dream around this berry. I'm not when the sun will just explode. Wake up, go down to the deep down.
Many of my viewers like to draw comparisons between me and a writer by the name of John Boyes, and it's a pretty fair comparison, considering John Boyes is one of my biggest inspirations as a creator today. Last Halloween, John wrote a short story about a pitcher who sells his soul to Satan and falls away from the earth in the middle of a baseball game. While this story is clearly a work of fiction, it is eerily comparable to the real life and death of Dale Earnhardt. Our story begins in the rural American town of Kannapolis, North Carolina. Sometime in the late 1960s, a young Dale Earnhardt drops out of high school and uses what little money he has to start competing at locally sanctioned dirt track races. Earnhardt most likely shares the same lofty, unobtainable pipe dream as all of his competitors, to work his way up the ranks and eventually race in the top series of NASCAR. NASCAR, like Dale Earnhardt, had its origins in the rural American South. The roots of the sport can be traced back to the Prohibition era, where moonshiners, attempting to smuggle barrelfuls of illegal whiskey, would tune up their cars to be able to outrun police. When Prohibition ended in the 1930s, the smugglers were left with nothing to do but race each other. Small, unsanctioned races began to take place all across the South, but perhaps no other place became a more popular racing destination than Daytona Beach, Florida. The beaches of Daytona feature finely grained sand that forms a hard, compact surface ideal for auto racing. In the early 20th century, automotive engineers would use the beaches of Daytona to try to break the land speed record. Eventually, record attempts would migrate to the salt flats of Bonneville, Utah, leaving Daytona open for a new frontier of stock car racing.
Try again. We'll get
Stock car racing differs greatly from other racing series such as IndyCar or Formula One. These types of open-wheel racing feature expertly crafted machines specifically designed to maximize speed and handling. While open-wheel machines require an impressive degree of skill and finesse to operate, their design also leaves them very fragile, rendering them virtually unable to contact each other on the track, as even a slight tap can produce a scrapyard of wrecked race cars. Because of this, open-wheel racers rarely ever touch, resulting in very clean and fluid racing. Stock cars are pretty much the complete opposite. It essentially asks the question of, what would happen if you bought a car from the dealership and started racing it? Naturally, consumer-grade cars are much more bulky and less aerodynamically dependent than their open-wheel counterparts. This allows stock cars to take much more of a beating while still remaining competitive, leading to a style of racing that is slower but much more durable and contact-heavy. It's a style of racing that started to become wildly popular in the American South. And perhaps no other man was more responsible for the rise of American stock car racing than Bill France. Bill France was a fan of stock car racing since the days of his youth in the Roaring '20s, where he would skip school to drive laps in his parents' Model T. When the Great Depression struck, Big Bill would flee to Daytona with less than $100 to his name. But he was able to stay afloat by racing cars on the beach. Eventually, Bill France would transition from race driver to race promoter, and on February 21st, 1948, he revolutionized American motorsports by founding the National Association for Stock Car Auto Racing, NASCAR. Before NASCAR, stock car racing mostly featured scattered and disorganized events with inconsistent rules. With no major governing body to sanction races, there was nothing stopping some promoters from just not paying drivers the winnings they were owed. NASCAR changed all of this by organizing a unified schedule of racing events, complete with a singular rule set, championship point system, and guaranteed driver winnings. NASCAR truly became the first legitimate stock car racing league in America, and all of a sudden, the allure of earning fame and fortune through a life of racing began to attract drivers from far and wide. One of these drivers was a young Ralph Earnhardt, who in 1953 started racing full-time in NASCAR's Sportsman Series. Ralph Earnhardt's talent on quarter-mile dirt tracks made him a regional racing star in the Carolinas, and even won him the Sportsman Series championship in 1956. And even though he would use his racing talent to single-handedly lift himself out of poverty, he surprisingly didn't wish the same destiny upon his son, Dale Earnhardt. Both Ralph and Dale grew up in Kannapolis, North Carolina, a town so rural that it wasn't even incorporated until 1984. Before that, almost everyone born into this place had no way out. Only Ralph Earnhardt's racing talent could save him from a lifelong career at the local cotton mill. Dale Earnhardt saw his father as his greatest inspiration, and he saw racing as his only real ticket to success. Ralph Earnhardt didn't want his son to race, despite his own talent in the sport. Talent is a very rare thing. If everyone were talented, no one would be. Ralph Earnhardt probably knew this, and if he had his way, Dale Earnhardt would have quit racing to graduate high school and get a nice desk job in the big city. He probably never expected his son to become one of the greatest drivers ever. He never lived to see it either. Just 20 years after he began racing full-time, Ralph Earnhardt died of a heart attack in his footsteps. And in trying to prove to his late father that he belonged in a race car, Dale Earnhardt would accidentally become one of the best in the world. Just 6 years later, he found himself at the crossroads of history.
Covering a city block a second in rush hour traffic. Take a look at that. Earnhardt blazes back into the front of this group. Here's Earnhardt, your leader, out of turn 4.
Even at the very beginning of Dale Earnhardt's rookie season in the NASCAR Winston Cup Series, his talent was undeniable. For a moment, he found himself leading the 21st annual Daytona 500, which may have been the most important race in the history of NASCAR. Daytona International Speedway is quite possibly the greatest arena ever constructed by man. The scale of this place is difficult to describe, but let's just say it's big enough to be sunny on one end and stormy on the other. This modern-day Coliseum is the fruit of one of the most ambitious engineering projects of the 20th century, conceived from the outrageous imagination of none other than Bill France. After 20 years of watching sloppy races on the beach, Bill France sought to construct a racetrack where drivers would never have to let off the throttle. The result was a 2.5-mile-long tri-oval surrounded by a 31-degree embankment. The sheer size of these corners is downright intimidating. It looks like you have a hard time walking up them, let alone driving on them. The mere architecture of this place boggles the mind today, so you could only imagine the amazement of the 42,000 spectators who witnessed the inaugural running of the Daytona 500. The pure spectacle of almost 60 stock cars barreling around an asphalt bowl at 135 miles per hour was something that no one had ever seen before. And after an unforgettable photo finish, the Daytona 500 immediately established itself as the most prestigious event on the NASCAR schedule. For every stock car driver in America, a win at Daytona is the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. At the time of its opening in 1959, Daytona International Speedway was the largest track of its kind. 10 years later, Bill France would build an even bigger one in Talladega, Alabama. And while Talladega Superspeedway would also go on to be very popular with fans, it would not displace the Daytona 500 as NASCAR's crown jewel event. And that's why in 1979, CBS elected to broadcast the full race live in front of a national audience. It would be the first live broadcast of an entire 500-mile motorsports event in the history of American television. NASCAR found itself in a perfect storm of circumstances, quite literally, as on the day of the race, a blizzard left most of the eastern U.S. stuck indoors with nothing to do but watch the Daytona 500. An estimated 15 million viewers tuned into this race, and for a brief moment, some of them got to see an unknown driver by the name of Dale Earnhardt leading the race. While his father dominated on short tracks, Dale Earnhardt would find his greatest success on the big ones, even though they would also provide him with his greatest turmoil. He didn't know it at the time, nor did anybody else watching, but Dale Earnhardt was cursed. This is the story of a person and a place, a racer's relationship with a racetrack. This was merely the first chapter of Dale versus Daytona. Earnhardt would go on to finish 8th out of 41 drivers in this race. Not bad for his very first attempt at NASCAR's most coveted prize. Dale Earnhardt's rookie effort would be reduced to an afterthought, however, as everyone's attention was instead drawn to perhaps the greatest finish in the history of NASCAR.
It's all come down to this. Out of turn 2, Donnie Allison in first. Where will Cale make his move? He comes to the inside. Donnie Allison throws the block. Cale hits him. He slides. Donnie Allison slides. They hit again. They climb into the turn. They're hitting the wall. They're head on the wall. Coming down. Richard Petty is now pulling out in front. Darrell Waltrip is in second. A.J. Boyd is in third. Here they come. Waltrip trying to slingshot. Petty is out in front. At the line. Waltrip. Petty Wilson. And here comes a $60,000 car becoming a 22-passenger school bus to bring his crew to victory lane. And there's a fight between Cale Yarborough and Donnie Allison. The tempers overflowing. They're angry. They know they have lost. And what a bitter defeat.
In just a matter of minutes, the television audience got to experience dramatic racing, a crash, an unforgettable last lap pass, NASCAR's most iconic driver setting an unbreakable record, and a bare-knuckle fistfight, all on live TV. All of a sudden, the colloquial regional sport of NASCAR found itself with a national audience. The finish made it all the way to the front page of the New York Times sports section, and NASCAR would never be the same. The 1979 season saw Dale Earnhardt capture his first career win in just his 16th start. He would win the Rookie of the Year award for that season and go on to finish 7th in the overall standings in a year where Richard Petty won his 7th and final Winston Cup championship. At this point in time, Richard Petty is unanimously regarded as the greatest driver in the history of the sport. Looking at it today, his career statistics seem almost mythical. Petty's 200 career victories are almost double the next driver on NASCAR's all-time win list, and his 7 series championships were, at the time, more than double any other driver. After the 1979 season, the mere notion of any other driver challenging Petty's throne as the greatest of all time was laughable. But if anyone were to do it, it would have to be a driver the likes of which no one had ever seen.
Where Dale Earnhardt in car number 2 is currently the leader, and he is on his way to victory and hopefully to pick up some additional points as he is on his way in his sophomore year to a national championship.
In 1980, Dale Earnhardt shocked everyone by winning the Winston Cup Series championship in just his second full-time season. Only the 15th different driver to achieve the title of NASCAR champion. Already in his young career, Dale Earnhardt had joined some elite company. But he would soon learn that even when you're great, you're still a long way from the best. Although he began with one of the greatest starts to any career in NASCAR history, Earnhardt's car owner Rod Osterlund would unexpectedly sell his race team midway through the 1981 season. Earnhardt reacted poorly to this transition and struggled for the next few seasons while bouncing from owner to owner. After going winless in 1981, Dale Earnhardt had the worst statistical season of his career the following season, finishing the 1982 campaign with an abysmal average finish of 19th, while failing to finish more than half of his races for the year. After such a promising beginning, Earnhardt's Winston Cup career had slammed straight into a concrete wall.
Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad. When you do that in a hot car, oh, we've got trouble in turn one. Look at that, two automobiles. That's Dale Earnhardt and the Wrangler Jeans machine.
One of Earnhardt's 18 DNFs for the season resulted from a violent crash at Pocono that sent his number 15 Ford skidding on its roof down the embankment of the first corner. The accident would fracture his kneecap, but it wouldn't stop the scrappy Earnhardt from racing the very next week at Talladega, where he would suffer another hard crash. This was surely the most trying time of Earnhardt's racing career. Many at this time began to wonder whether Earnhardt's 1980 championship was just a fluke. But Dale Earnhardt was not like the other drivers. He wasn't racing for the fame or the fortune. He was racing to prove that he belonged. He was racing to prove himself to his late father, and when a man is dead set on accomplishing an impossible task, he will never stop chasing it. When faced with the lowest moment of his career, Dale Earnhardt did what he always did. He waited for an opportunity and pushed forward.
Earnhardt going to turn 3 at 200 miles an hour. Winds it up, fires it in there. A brilliant maneuver by Earnhardt. The checkered flag belongs today to Dale Earnhardt.
Stock car racing's all-time winner, Richard Petty.
When you need a mower, go with the best. Go with Lowe's.
You'll be a winner at Lowe's.
Every weekend throughout America, there is great NASCAR racing. I wouldn't be anywhere else.
Off your food order, you can spend blah 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 blah. Back to the video.
Is this the best a man can get? Is this the best a man can get?
Is this the best a man can get?
But something can finally achieve.
Yeah, you're an idiot. You're an idiot. Okay, I'm fucking better than you. Okay, much better. You are garbage. I'm not.
Hey, I was watching that.
The majority of the
Watching that!
Join the club today and you'll see why 2019 won't be like 1984. Dale Earnhardt found himself with a new owner, Richard Childress, and a new car number, 3. He would stick with both of them for the rest of his career. Under Childress, Earnhardt's career would immediately begin to rebound, and it would mark the beginning of his finest era. By 1986, Earnhardt would be champion once more, becoming just the 11th driver in history to win multiple NASCAR championships. In 1987, he had the best statistical season of his career, finishing the year with 11 wins and his 3rd Cup championship. And after this dominant season, Earnhardt would return in black, embracing his new role as the Intimidator. Now would probably be a good time to explain what exactly made Dale Earnhardt such a potent racer. Well, Dale Earnhardt first learned his racing style from watching his father slide around on dirt tracks, and he never really unlearned it. Remember earlier how I mentioned that the durability of stock cars allows them to more easily bump into each other? Well, Dale Earnhardt would take this idea and turn his vehicle into a weapon. Earnhardt would make frequent use of the bump and run. a racing tactic where a driver uses the inertia of their own car to move other drivers out of the way and advance their position. It's a maneuver that's practically unheard of in open-wheel racing because it's really only possible in a series like NASCAR. Even within NASCAR, the bump and run is still a highly controversial move. Racing purists consider it a dirty tactic, as it detracts from the skill of outlining your competitors. Other fans view it as a valid and necessary part of stock car racing, considering it's a viable strategy that's not against the rules. Your outlook on this issue most likely determine whether or not you are a fan of Dale Earnhardt, as his frequent use of the bump and run quickly made him one of the most polarizing drivers in NASCAR, and his notoriety would only grow as he became one of the most dominant drivers in the sport. For many drivers, nothing was scarier than seeing Dale Earnhardt in the rearview mirror. If you saw the number 3 Chevy behind you, he would either get out of his way, or he would make you get out of his way. For many years, Earnhardt was NASCAR's greatest heel.
It's not fair, and they try to race nice and clean. And, you know, the thing of it is, you go out and you run as hard as you can all day long, and then him trying to cut you out that money, that ain't the way I was brought up, right?
I guess what they were insinuating, don't go run into Dale Earnhardt.
If you weren't an Earnhardt fan, it was probably very easy to hate him, because there was a good chance you could recall a time when he wrecked your favorite driver. Despite Earnhardt's tendency to enforce his will upon other drivers on the track, he certainly had his fair share of supporters. Dale Earnhardt raced in real life how anybody races the first time they pick up a NASCAR video game.
Yes.
The other drivers were just obstacles separating him from first place. Many fans found Earnhardt's cavalier style endearing and relatable. He would struggle and claw for every single position, much like how many fans in the poor American South had to struggle for every paycheck. Who cares if he bangs up some other cars? He's just trying to win like the rest of them. An uneducated small-town hick with no other prospects trying to turn lemons into lemonade. For anyone stuck in rural America, Earnhardt represented the way out. Standing outside of his car, Earnhardt was just like them. But as soon as he stepped inside that black number 3, he transformed into a racing god. A lot of Earnhardt's detractors pointed to his racing style as an unfair crutch, but eventually, for anyone watching long enough, his talent was undisputable.
After a while, it became undeniable. Goes on the grass, cuts back, and Earnhardt still got the lead. Incredible.
Although Dale Earnhardt remains one of the most memorable NASCAR drivers to this day, he was never the most popular driver. That distinction belonged to Bill Elliott.
You know, Bill Elliott I have been not the aggressive driver all my life. You know, I've tried to give and take to the best of the thing. But when a guy cuts you off that bad and that obvious, it's time to take the other cheek.
Bill Elliott hated Dale Earnhardt. Georgia, in many ways a foil to Dale Earnhardt. Yeah. He, too, came from a racing family and rose to prominence in the 80s as one of NASCAR's best. The soft-spoken and humble Elliott contrasted heavily with the outspoken and brash Earnhardt. Whereas Earnhardt would gain notoriety for his combative racing style, the name of Elliott's game was speed. Over the past decade in NASCAR, the overall speeds of the race cars had gradually risen, especially on the giant superspeedways of Daytona and Talladega. In 1984, Cale Yarborough became the first stock car driver in history to set a 200-mile-per-hour qualifying lap at Daytona. The very next lap, he would lose control and total his race car. As the speeds crept upwards, the drivers crept ever closer to the edge of control. Despite the newfound risk, NASCAR's top speeds continue to climb. With each new superspeedway event, engineers and crews would roll out ever so faster cars. And from 1985 to 1987, no car was faster than Bill Elliott's red and white Ford Thunderbird. Perhaps his most stunning achievement came in the 1985 Winston 500, when Elliott cut an oil line and fell 2 laps behind the leaders, only to make up the entire deficit under green and win the race. His car was simply that much faster than the others.
In modern times, nobody has monopolized NASCAR racing like Bill Elliott. He has raced around this season faster than a person throwing double sixes.
2 years later at the same event, Bill Elliott would set NASCAR's all-time speed record, 212.8 miles per hour. For comparison, the pole speed for the Indianapolis 500 that same year, the fastest open wheel race, was 215. It's also important to note that, on average, a stock car weighs about twice as much as an Indy car. There's been a pretty big elephant in the room during this whole video. So far I've talked on and on about the history of NASCAR, but I have yet to explain why people actually like it. I mean, sure, it's easy to cherry pick the sport's most exciting moments, But what about the other 99% of the time it's just regular old-fashioned racing? What's the appeal of watching cars go around in circles? Well, long story short, people don't watch NASCAR for the same reasons they watch other sports. You can pick up a football and start playing right now in your backyard. Yep. You can't just hop in a NASCAR and start racing people. In order to understand the appeal of NASCAR, we have to talk about soldiers, astronauts, and prestige. Being a soldier comes with a certain amount of prestige. Most people find their sacrifice admirable, but you don't have to search far to find people who disagree. You'd be hard-pressed, however, to find anyone who doubts the prestige of an astronaut. You can talk about intelligence and science degrees and technical skill all you want, but the fact of the matter is that soldiers fight against other soldiers in man-made wars, while astronauts fight against the surly bonds of nature itself. It takes bravery to volunteer yourself to go fight in some far-off foreign land, but it takes a whole nother level of bravery to strap yourself into a pressurized metal canister and fly out of the top of the sky. Astronauts have so much prestige because they come the closest to kissing the snarling jaws of certain death. There's no denying that war is also deadly, but humans have been fighting and killing each other since the dawn of man. It's easy to understand the nature of warfare. It's difficult to understand the limits of nature itself. And nothing is more terrifying than what we don't understand. Who am I kidding? This is a dumb analogy. NASCAR drivers are nothing like astronauts. I mean, come on. Have you ever seen a NASCAR fly? In the race immediately corresponding with Bill Elliott's record-breaking qualifying lap, Bobby Allison would blow a tire in the tri-oval. The back of his car would lift off the ground and sail into the catch fence at nearly 200 miles per hour. It turns out that if you spin a car sideways at a fast enough speed, the aerodynamics will force the car aloft like the wing of an airplane. In the 1987 Winston 500, the 210-mile-per-hour pace was enough to lift up Bobby Allison's 3,500-pound race car like a piece of paper. For a brief, surreal moment, all of NASCAR stood still. By pure chance, Allison's left front fender clipped the wall the instant before the back of his car hit the catch fence, which redirected the momentum of his car away from the spectators. Had Allison spun at just a slightly different angle, we could have witnessed a tragedy on the scale of the 1955 Le Mans disaster, where an out-of-control race car was projected into the stands at a very high speed. 83 spectators were killed in the catastrophe, leading many European nations to place a temporary ban on all motorsports. To this day, it remains the deadliest accident in racing history. Allison's car had sheared a 100-foot gap in the protective fencing, and NASCAR fans found themselves staring into an eerie window of what could have happened. Miraculously, only 5 spectators were injured, and no one was killed. The line between driver and spectator had been severed, and it could have ended NASCAR entirely. Fortunately, NASCAR would make good use of their second chance, as the era of speed came to a permanent end.
Add chime. I gotta turn the light on so I can see.
This accident would force NASCAR to implement restrictor plates at all future superspeedway races, which would limit the horsepower of all cars to keep them below dangerous speeds. This would profoundly change the way drivers raced at Daytona and Talladega. Gone were the days of Bill Elliott making up 5 miles under green. Restrictor plates made it so that cars could no longer pull away from each other, instead emphasizing the attractive effects of slipstream. Simple racing moves such as passing were now drastically altered, as timing and aerodynamics were now much more important than speed and handling.
Restrictor ate it all up. It made everybody the same speed, and that made it probably more dangerous than when we were running 210.
Naturally, many drivers were unhappy with this new change, and no driver hated restrictor plate racing more than Dale Earnhardt.
As slow as all of us is running, that probably trouble everywhere.
Which was a little odd, considering he was the best restrictor plate racer on the planet.
By Dale Earnhardt. I'm all for safety, but raceways have always been for high speeds. It has been one of the fastest tracks in U.S., and I think it's took some of the glamour out of the Daytona 500.
Dominant runs of any race category in motorsports history, and it happened during a time when NASCAR had arguably its toughest ever competition. The 90s truly were a golden age of NASCAR and popular culture. Attendance and television ratings steadily rose as movies like Days of Thunder drew intrigue from across the nation. Big brands and TV networks were lining up to capture their own slice of the booming NASCAR scene. NASCAR had gone fully national, and it had fundamentally transformed itself from a simple showcase of speed in the prior decade. The sponsors, drivers, tracks, and cars had all changed, but one thing remained the same. Dale Earnhardt was dominating the competition. From 1990 to 1994, Dale Earnhardt would win 4 more Cup championships, tying Richard Petty's record of 7, a record considered by many to be untouchable just 10 years prior. With each new championship, it became harder and harder for people to disregard Earnhardt's success. Although many still resented his racing style, you can't win 7 NASCAR championships without being a pretty talented driver. Earnhardt's detractors were simply running out of excuses to deny his greatness. Soon, there was only one thing keeping Dale out of the conversation for the greatest of all time.
Now, you've not won Daytona, right?
I've won Daytona, the firecracker race in July, but I haven't won the Daytona 500. That's like the Super Bowl race for us.
After 17 years of effort, the Daytona 500 belongs to Franklin, Tennessee's Darrell Waltrip. He's done it.
Oh, I won the Daytona 500. I won the Daytona 500.
In 1989, Darrell Waltrip won his first and only Daytona 500 in his 17th attempt. At the time, he was considered the best driver to never win it, and after he did, everyone was left to wonder about the next best driver to take Waltrip's place. Immediately, many thought of Dale Earnhardt, who had yet to win the Daytona 500 after 11 tries. But surely in 1990, while entering the final corner of the final lap in first place, after leading 3/4 of the race, Earnhardt could put the narrative to rest.
They still run single file, halfway down the back straightaway, half a lap to go. Still Earnhardt now stretching his lead by another car. Cope, the body can't do anything with Cope either. Earnhardt's car blows up. Earnhardt blows a tire in turn number 3.
And on the outside, it is car number 10, Derek Cope. Something amiss on the Earnhardt car. Coming to the line, it's Labonte pulling up, and an amazing finish.
Dale, what the heck happened on the last lap?
We run over some debris and cut a right rear tire down, David. Just a 1/4 of a lap away from victory.
In 1991, Earnhardt would damage his car after hitting a seagull, forcing him to pit. He would battle all the way back to second place before crashing with 2 laps to go.
Dale Earnhardt fails to win the Daytona 500 again.
In 1992, Earnhardt would get caught up in a crash that wasn't his fault. A newfound consequence of restrictor plate racing were massive crashes that would often wipe out over a dozen cars. After a while, these crashes seemed almost inevitable due to the extremely close pack racing that now resembled rush hour traffic, but at 190 miles per hour. One slight error by a single driver could spark a chain reaction that would take many cars out of the race. It was one of Earnhardt's main reasons for hating restrictor plate racing, and he would fall victim to it numerous times. In 1993, Earnhardt would once again lead most of the race, only to finish second after Dale Jarrett passed him on the final lap. After a 7th place finish in 94, Earnhardt would finish second again in 1995, and again in 1996. Later in the 96 season, Earnhardt would suffer a horrific-looking crash that sent his number 3 Chevy tumbling down the Talladega front stretch.
Dale Earnhardt attempting to walk to the ambulance as he walks away from one of the worst incidents in his racing career.
While it was known that Dale Earnhardt hated restrictor plate racing, it was starting to look like restrictor plate racing hated him.
All those frustrations for Earnhardt, so close, so many times when it should have been his, and it wasn't.
We get the right help, we're at the right place at the
right times, like I just told Richard. I said, what do you think? You know him better than I do. He said, I've been here a lot of times before, and you can bet he's been in the floor pan right now with that throttle pedal, but it's racing God's time to shine on that 3. We'll just have to see.
As was the formula at this point, Earnhardt ran up front all day and found himself in a battle for the lead with just a few laps to go. And all of a sudden, he found himself on his roof once again.
Oh, Jarrett's loose. Down the back straightaway. Big trouble. Earnhardt out. Up and over number 3. And for the 19th time, Lady Luck deals a bad hand.
I'm not sure I actually believe in curses, but Dale Earnhardt's misfortune in the Daytona 500 really made me consider it. For some wicked reason, the 7-time NASCAR champion and best superspeedway racer in the world could not, for the life of him, win this one superspeedway race. Earnhardt's gut-wrenching futility at this one event is made even more insane when you consider that he's the winningest driver in the history of the track. No, seriously. By 1997, Earnhardt had won pretty much every stock car event at Daytona multiple times over, all except the one that mattered most. After 19 tries and 19 failures, he should have been completely discouraged. But Dale Earnhardt was not a quitting man. He wasn't even willing to quit this race.
What a pile of grit. Earnhardt is in the car. He's barking instructions to the crew. This thing is so beat up. If Earnhardt can make 1 lap or 2, it's an absolute miracle.
Even though he no longer had any chance of winning, Dale Earnhardt would hop out of the ambulance and back into his mangled car to finish the race. When faced with the lowest moment of his career, Dale Earnhardt did what he always did. He waited for an opportunity and pushed forward.
Coming off of turn 2, some cars get tangled and it might be bit. Whoever gets back to the start-finish line will get the white and the yellow together. 20 years of trying, 20 years of frustration. Dale Earnhardt will come to the caution flag to win the Daytona 500. Finally, every man on every crew has come out to the edge of pit lane to congratulate the man who has dominated everything there is to win in this sport, except this race, until today. They used to boo Dale Earnhardt when he was winning too much. That'll happen if you dominate any sport. But today, when they introduced the Intimidator, the crowd was full of cheers.
All them race fans and all them people have been saying, Dale, this is your year. Dale, this is your year. And boy, a lot of them said it this year. The Daytona 500 is ours. We've won it. We've won it. We've won it.
We won it.
The hangover from Earnhardt's Daytona 500 victory lasted throughout the 1998 season, where Dale would not win another race and finish a distant 8th in points.
Yeah, but
perhaps overcoming the single greatest foe in his racing career was a little demotivating. After winning the 500, Earnhardt had almost nothing left to accomplish.
True.
He could have tried for another championship, breaking the tie with Richard Petty, but both he and a lot of others began to tell that his age was starting to get the best of him. Later in the 98 season, Earnhardt suffered his second hard crash at Talladega in 2 years. In the post-race interview, Earnhardt for the first time ever sounded fed up, exhausted, and demoralized.
What was the day like up to that point? It was good. It's not good racing, though. Y'all can talk about all you want. It ain't good racing.
In 1999, Earnhardt would infamously dump Terry Labonte to win at Bristol.
Leader change and Labonte takes the lead. And meanwhile, Ricky Rudd running. Oh, and Earnhardt sends him out. Dale Earnhardt takes the checkered flag.
Any goodwill he had from his crowning achievement just a year prior had worn out its welcome, as Earnhardt was showered in a chorus of boos from the 140,000 in attendance. At this point, Earnhardt and the fans had a mutual yearning for something new.
I'm here with Dale Earnhardt after he just won the Die Hard 500.
What's the question, dude?
How was the race?
Dale Earnhardt Jr. is Texas Speedway's second first-time Winston Cup winner.
While Dale Earnhardt never achieved his dream of racing alongside his father, he was able to race alongside his son. Dale Earnhardt Jr. made his full-time Winston Cup debut in 2000 under his father's own race team. Dale Jr. captured his first career win in just his 12th overall start, almost 21 years to the day of his father's first win. In Victory Lane that day, Dale Sr. appeared to take more pride in his son's accomplishment than any of his own. Racing with his son seemed to renew Dale Earnhardt's sense of purpose. Some would say that's all he ever really wanted, to race side by side with his own flesh and blood. And although the aging Earnhardt was nearing the end of his career, he would still make you think twice about questioning his greatness. Legend has it that Dale Earnhardt was so good at restrictor plate racing because he could see the air coming off of the other cars and used this ability to perfectly time his passes. Dale Earnhardt's 76th and final career win came, fittingly, in a restrictor plate race at Talladega.
Take a look at this moment. That is Michael Waltrip, out of control, tri-oval, into a series of sidewinders. 9 shattering snap rolls.
Prior to the start of the 2001 season, DEI signed Michael Waltrip to drive the number 15 Chevy. Michael Waltrip had spent his entire career racing in the shadow of his older brother Darrell, and after 15 lackluster seasons, Michael Waltrip was still seeking his first career win. Dale Earnhardt believed in Michael, however, and he would open 2001 racing not just with his son, but with his team. I think all of you know what happens next. It was probably the only thing you knew about Dale Earnhardt. On one February afternoon, Dale Earnhardt would enter his black number 3 for the final time. Incidentally, the crash would leave Dale Earnhardt in third position behind the DEI cars of Dale Jr. and Michael Waltrip. As the laps wound down, everyone began to realize that Dale Earnhardt wasn't trying to win the race. Rather, he was holding back the rest of the field so that his team could win instead. Dale managed to hold off everybody until the final corner of the final lap.
3 wide behind them. You got him, Mikey. You got him, man. You got him.
The cameras cut away from the accident. It should have been one of the happiest moments in NASCAR history, as Darrell Waltrip joyfully commentated his brother's first win on the grandest stage of all. A storybook ending to a picturesque day of thrilling, action-packed racing. And then the cameras cut to Dale Earnhardt's crumpled vehicle lying at rest in the infield grass. Nobody knew it at the time, but the greatest...
I'm going to stop him right there. The only positive is that he basically died instantly and he felt no pain.
Tragedy in NASCAR history had just occurred. Dale Earnhardt, NASCAR's greatest driver, was dead at 49.
This is undoubtedly one of the toughest announcements that I've ever personally had to make.
Iconic audio.
But after the accident in turn 4 at the end of the Daytona 500, we've lost Dale Earnhardt.
In the audio, there's like invisible gaps.
The official cause of death is listed as a basilar skull fracture sustained as a result of blunt force trauma. When Dale Earnhardt struck the turn 4 wall, he died instantly. Looking back on it all today, it's hard to believe it even happened. Dale Earnhardt was NASCAR's Iron Man, the toughest driver in the sport. He hadn't missed a race since his rookie season. He walked away from this and this. Why did he die from this? How did no one die from this crash earlier in the race? Well, at over 190 miles per hour, destinies can be profoundly altered by a matter of inches. NASCAR's greatest tragedy was avoided by inches, and NASCAR's greatest tragedy was caused by inches. In the lap 173 crash, Dale Earnhardt was just inches away from getting collected. Ironically, if Earnhardt had just been a little less fortunate here, it's likely that he would still be alive today.
I remember him coming on there, and I can't remember if it's before or as soon as the wreck happened or during the red flag.
He died doing what he loved.
Richard, if they don't do something to these cars, it's going to end up killing somebody.
True. He died doing what he loved, but he warned.
Dale Earnhardt was always aware of NASCAR's darkest secret. He just never imagined that he'd be the one reminding everyone of the truth. NASCAR is caked with the blood of dead drivers. The reason NASCAR was so compelling was because it was deadly. Obviously, no one actively wished death upon drivers, but it was mutually understood as an inherent risk of gliding around in a 3,500-pound hunk of metal at 190 miles per hour. Every few years or so, a driver would unexpectedly die in a race. Since the very beginning of the sport, this was the dark reality in the back of everyone's mind. You never wanted to see it happen, but when it did, you accepted it as inevitable and moved on.
It still happened.
Dale's death was very different, though.
I'm pretty sure
many racing fans still haven't moved on.
It
was just too painful. The biggest icon in racing dying in the middle of the biggest event. Imagine if Michael Jordan died during the NBA Finals, or if Tom Brady died during the Super Bowl. This is what it felt like watching Dale Earnhardt die in the Daytona 500, and in my humble opinion, it's the single worst tragedy in the history of American sports.
Yes.
Even though Dale Earnhart's death was a devastating shock for the millions of fans watching, you could at least take solace in knowing that he probably wouldn't have wanted to go out any other way. Dale Earnhardt died doing what he loved.
The only thing comparable, in my opinion, is at least just because of the numbers, is the Le Mans disaster, which killed. It was another race car incident. It killed a bunch of people. It's the deadliest race car disaster in history. It happened in the 50s, I believe. Basically, a car crashed into the audience and it killed a bunch of people. But this is the greatest tragedy in sports history because it changed NASCAR forever. NASCAR has not been the same since Dale Earnhardt died.
And his final memory was watching his own drivers speeding towards the finish line with nothing but open racetrack in front of them.
I think Dale Earnhardt is the best race driver that's ever been in a stock car. How do you feel about that?
Oh, I mean, that's a big statement. I think my dad was the greatest when it comes to racers.
For as much as he accomplished, no one knew for sure if Dale ever felt he proved himself to his father. It's a burden he took to his grave, leaving us to wonder about Dale much in the same way Dale had to wonder about Ralph. The only thing we know for sure is that Dale finally caught up with his father's ghost. The story doesn't end here. Although NASCAR suffered perhaps its greatest ever loss, they still had 35 more races to run that season. When faced with their lowest moment, NASCAR had no other option but to push forward.
He was on the cover of Time magazine after his death. It wasn't like a fucking, this is like red cuts or sad or some shit like that. No, this was a huge fucking deal. Dale Earnhardt was an international celebrity. Don't think it's just like a bunch of rednecks being sad. February 1, 2001, after the tragedy of Daytona, Richard Childress would call on rookie Kevin Harvick. March 11th, the day before my birthday, in a photo, Harvick would secure his first career victory in a third Cup start. Remarkably, the perfect finish. A lot of good stuff happened. Basically, Dale Earnhardt, Kevin Harvick showed his speed.
Kevin Harvick as the
cathartic moment in NASCAR history. Dale Earnhardt Jr. would win at the track that took his father's life just 5 months earlier. For many fans, this win was enough to heal the wounds from the tragedy of that year's Daytona 500. Some fans thought this finish was literally too good to be true, and that NASCAR rigged it. A compelling theory until you consider the years of DEI restrictor plate dominance that followed. From 2001 through 2003, DEI carried the torch of Dale Earnhardt's restrictor plate prowess by winning 9 of the 12 superspeedway events. In 2004, Dale Jr. would achieve what took his father 20 years by winning the Daytona 500 in just his 5th attempt.
The legacy continues. Dale Earnhardt Jr. wins the 46th Daytona 500.
Fans are a fickle bunch.
Following the death of Dale Earnhardt, NASCAR would work to implement an unprecedented amount of driver safety improvements, most notably the Hans device, safer barrier, and car of tomorrow, to make sure that an accident like Dale Earnhardt's could never happen again.
Incredibly hard impact. Look at that safer barrier right there, how it just crushed all that stuff.
My goodness. And to this day, Dale Earnhardt still remains NASCAR's last fatality.
This isn't true. I'm pretty sure there was I'm pretty sure a guy got hit by, like Tony Stewart was involved in a fatality. I'm gonna Google this. I need to fact check it. NASCAR death. Most recent NASCAR death. Johnny Roten, a performance director, 2025 after a brief illness. A medical emergency during a race. Dale Earnhardt was the most recent driver fatality, but there have been pit crew members who have died. So people still be dying.
Unfortunately, NASCAR's great strides in driver safety may be the only positive news for the sport in the past decade. Attendance, sponsorships, and television ratings have all drastically declined in the past 10 years, leaving the few remaining fans to wonder what exactly drove everyone away. Some people blame the recent mismanagement from Brian France and other NASCAR executives. Some people blame the chase and other gimmicks that have alienated NASCAR's core fan base. Some people blame the lack of interesting or relatable drivers. Some people blame the recession and how it hit NASCAR's core audience the hardest, preventing them from going to races. If you ask me, however, the main reason so many fans stopped watching NASCAR is, ironically, because it got safer. As morbid as it is to say, by removing the inherent risk of racing, NASCAR removed the one thing that separated them from all other sports. Today, NASCAR drivers have never been farther from the snarling jaws of certain death, and the sport has been made far less compelling as a result.
I'm sure we're maybe he thinks if he runs it, that's what he's doing.
Hockey's popular.
Like a marathon, he's an athlete, a marathon runner. I want to finish the race. And he did. To a standing ovation from the crowd. Shades of Ricky Bobby.
Ever since that fateful day, NASCAR fans have been trying to fill the void that Dale Earnhardt left. There's the driver who carried on his name, Dale Earnhardt Jr. Following his father's passing, he became NASCAR's perennial most popular driver until his retirement in 2017. Although he finished with a respectable 26 career wins, Dale Jr. failed to capture a single championship and could never live up to his father's godlike legacy. There's the driver who carried on his car, Kevin Harvick, who was able to capture at least one championship and his own Daytona 500 victory, a successful career for sure, but not much compared to Earnhardt's. There's the driver who carried on his title as the 7-time champion, Jimmy Johnson, who in 2016 became the 3rd ever driver to accomplish this feat. While he is statistically the best driver since Earnhardt, Johnson never managed to appeal to fans in the same way, as his relatively bland demeanor failed to capture the hearts and minds of the greater audience. And then there's the driver who carried on Earnhardt's number. After the tragedy, Richard Childress retired the number from active competition for over a decade, but he brought it back in 2014 for the the July Daytona race. Dylan would suffer a gruesome-looking accident where his car was launched directly into the catch fence. For a brief moment, every fan watching tensed up in horror after witnessing what they thought was the second fatality of the 3 car at Daytona. Incredibly, Austin Dillon walked away from this with only minor injuries. Some have called him the luckiest driver in NASCAR today, but his luck hasn't contributed to much success on the track. So far, for 5 full-time seasons, Dillon has only 2 wins to his name. One of those wins came in the 2018 Daytona 500, as 20 years after Earnhart's storybook victory, the 3 car returned to victory lane at Daytona.
And here it comes with the number 3, 20 years ago. 20 years of trying for Earnhardt. He won the Daytona 500. Austin Dillon wins the 60th running of the Great American Race.
We're all searching for the next Dale Earnhardt, but we know deep down that he's irreplaceable. Many fans consider Earnhardt the greatest NASCAR driver of all time, possibly because we never got to see him decline. Dale Earnhardt remained one of the best drivers in the sport till the day he died, and even then, he still finished ahead of 30 other drivers.
Find another video to watch. This video is almost over.
Everyone knows what it's like to be stuck in bumper-to-bumper traffic, and all of us experience the same desire to break free from all the gridlock. Not just from the traffic, but from everything. Responsibilities, labor, authority. Sometimes there's no better feeling than seeing miles of open road in front of you. Dale Earnhardt gave this feeling to millions watching at home, and seeing Dale succeed made them believe they could too. For many, Dale Earnhardt was a real-life hero. But most people will never know his story. Most people only know him as some guy who died. They'll never know about the turmoil, the struggle, the determination, the notoriety, the heartbreak, or the triumph. They'll never care about any of it, because who could care about a bunch of cars going around in circles? NASCAR may never be popular again. Realistically, it probably should have never become popular in the first place. It's just a simple sport where no-name hillbillies gather to watch a bunch of fast cars race each other. But Dale Earnhardt made it mean more than that. And for as long as NASCAR sticks around,
Dale Earnhardt literally has a statue in his
will
hometown.
Always remember the man in the black number 3, because there will never ever be another driver like him.
You got plenty of money. Don't need that to keep racing. Is it worth the risk to keep on going?
Sure, to win.
There it is. Our house in New Orleans. They call the rising sun. And it's been a boy. And God, I know I'm one. That's a good video. You should subscribe to M. Lemon. He makes really good video essays. We're going to continue robbing his content for a little bit more. He don't care. He wants you to watch his videos. Please, watch his videos. Don't just listen to me fucking watching his videos. Go out there yourself and watch his videos. They're really good. He has amazing editing styles. He hires people. He used to do his own editing. Jesus Christ, this guy is a madman. Okay, Wizard of Oz and the Dark Side of Hollywood.
Your crypto can be earning you up to...
Okay.
I could comb away my troubles, but all I have is stubble without a hat to wear.
Okay. I can do it.
I could use a brush for hours and clog the drains of showers.
If I only had some hair.
I only had some hair.
The National Weather Service has issued a downward spiral warning in your area. Please remain calm. Do not attempt to flee or seek shelter. Resistance is futile.
Oh boy, I have a feeling we're not in Florida anymore.
I am Dr. Spiral, the great and powerful. Welcome to Green Screen City.
Hey, I've seen you before. You look just like that man behind the curtain.
Pay no attention to
I
the
swear to
man
God, if we
behind the
lose
curtain.
because we got distracted.
You were
No!
brought here because you wished for
We
your
got to score, baby.
Wait, I can tell where this is going. Are you really doing this again? Were the 4 other times not enough?
Pay no attention to the 4 other ads I've done for this product. I won't put much work into this one. Just look at all these zany green screen effects.
Wow. You sold out, man. What happened to you? You used to be cool.
You want to know what's cool? Having hair.
Having money.
Considering that pathetic.
You want to know what's cool?
2 minutes ago.
Living.
Wait, I'm sorry. I was just being bitter because I didn't discover Keeps until it was too late.
Silence! I was prepared to grant you Keeps' 90% effectiveness at reducing and stopping the symptoms of hair loss. I was prepared to connect you with an online doctor and have your order shipped right to your door. But now, your insolence has made me reconsider. You don't deserve the most affordable FDA-approved hair loss product.
Wait, no. Please save my hair. I'll do anything.
Silence! You had your chance to visit Keeps.com/employment for 50% off your first order. But now, you're doomed to lose all the rest of your hair and wind up like my cousin, Dr. Oz. I command you to leave this place immediately. The Wizard of Oz is one of the most iconic films in the history of cinema. According to the Library of Congress, it's the single most watched film of all time. Very few artistic works from the 1930s have managed to persist within the public consciousness, but even now, 82 years later, most of you watching know exactly who these characters are. Far less known, however, are the people behind these characters. Principal photography for The Wizard of Oz lasted from October 1938 to March 1939. During these 5 months, the stars of the movie were subject to some of the most horrendous conditions in the history of the American film industry. When it was all said and done, not a single character who set off down the yellow brick road left the land of Oz unscathed. That's not to say that things were much better back home in Kansas. The 1930s were a period of major turmoil and hardship for the American public. The Great Depression ravaged almost every sector of the economy. While most American industries were struggling, the film industry was booming. To escape from the dread of every about 1 in 10 Americans have gone to the movies in the past week. In the 30s, however, it was not uncommon for half of all Americans to pay a weekly visit to the theater. Hollywood was in the midst of its golden age, a period where studios had unparalleled influence over the industry. During this time, the top 8 studios controlled 95% of American cinema, and no studio was more illustrious than MGM. They were the studio widely considered to provide audiences with the biggest stars and the grandest spectacle. MGM smoked the rest of Hollywood with its unmatched financial and critical success. Across the 30s, MGM films accounted for nearly a third of the nominees for Best Picture, and nearly 3/4 of the total profits generated by all 8 major studios. MGM's dominance over Hollywood was due in large part to the strong leadership of its chief executive, Louis B. Mayer, who in 1937 was the highest paid man in America. 1937 also saw the release of one of the most groundbreaking films ever made, and one of the most successful films of the time to not come out of the MGM system. That year, Walt Disney would release his first animated feature film, Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. The film was an immersive fantasy unlike anything audiences had ever seen, and by the following year had become the highest-grossing film to date. Snow White's record-breaking success inspired MGM to produce a spectacular fantasy of their own. In 1938, the studio bought out the rights to L. Frank Baum's popular children's novel, The Wonderful Wizard of Oz, and the rest was history. A history that some members of the cast and crew wished they could forget. Unlike Snow White, The Wizard of Oz was entirely live action, which presented a series of challenges while attempting to transform fantasy into reality. One of the most iconic scenes in all of cinema is Dorothy waking up in the land of Oz and the film transitioning from sepia to color. The official coloring method used to develop the film was Technicolor, which required heavy exposure due to the process of splitting the image into different color channels. As a result, the Oz set required an exorbitant amount of lighting, so much so that the temperature on stage often surpassed 100 degrees Fahrenheit. The heat was suffocating, and stagehands frequently had to be carried off stage after fainting. The set lighting was so intense that some actors even claimed to suffer permanent vision damage. The exhaustion suffered from the oppressive heat was only magnified by the arduous production schedule. For 6 days a week, the actors walked into the studio at 4 a.m. and didn't leave until 7 p.m. A significant part of each actor's day was dedicated to the meticulous preparation and removal of their costumes. The Scarecrow, Tin Man, and Cowardly Lion are one of the most recognizable trios in fiction. All three characters were brought to life by the skilled design of makeup artist Jack Dawn. While the costumes presented an impeccable external appearance, conditions weren't so pleasant on the inside. Every morning as the Scarecrow, Ray Bolger would have to spend an hour getting his latex and plastic mask painstakingly glued to his face, and every evening he would spend an hour getting it removed. The mask completely covered his facial pores, meaning that he was physically unable to sweat while wearing it. One could only imagine how it must have felt to wear that thing for 15 hours a day, but Ray Bolger didn't have to imagine. For 22 weeks, it was his reality. By the time filming was complete, the repeated applications of the mask left Bolger with permanent grooves around his mouth and chin, but considering what happened to some of the other actors, he may have gotten off easy. The Tin Man was played by Buddy Ebsen for about 9 days. That's how long he lasted during filming until he was hospitalized from a severe reaction to the Tin Man's metallic makeup. Ebsen's silver face paint was made out of aluminum powder that would eventually coat the inside of his lungs, nearly asphyxiating him. As Ebsen sat bedridden under an oxygen tent in the hospital, the studio could not have given him less sympathy. Producer Mervyn LeRoy repeatedly phoned the hospital, angrily insisting that Ebsen return to the set. After 2 weeks out of action, the studio replaced Ebsen with Jack Haley. Much like Pete Best getting cut from the Beatles, Buddy Ebsen would end up becoming one of the unluckiest men in show business. Not only was he unceremoniously fired from what would have been the biggest role of his career, the incident left him with chronic bronchitis. Jack Haley managed to avoid a catastrophic reaction to the aluminum makeup, but it still gave him a severe eye infection that forced him out of work for days. The rest of the suit was so stiff that it rendered Haley unable to sit down or lie down during filming. In order to rest in between takes, he was forced to lean on a reclining board. But despite all the complications it caused, the Tin Man costume may have still been preferable to that of the Cowardly Lion. Burt Lahr's lion suit was compared to carrying around a mattress. The bulk of the costume consisted of a 60-pound lion hide, a real lion hide. Combined with additional padding, some estimates put the weight of the full costume at 100 pounds. Burt Lahr would become drenched in sweat after just a few minutes, and he would frequently have to take off the suit between shots to avoid exhaustion. The prosthetic mask covering his face didn't allow him to fully open his mouth, forcing him to consume all of his on-set meals through a straw. Halfway through production, Lahr gave in and sacrificed an additional hour each day in the makeup chair so that he could eat solid food at lunch. As someone who was known by his peers to be a hypochondriac, Burt Lahr was in near constant agony. But by far the worst costume-related accident during the whole shoot happened to Margaret Hamilton, better known as the Wicked Witch.
Ad chimes.
Nowadays, there are lots of ways to make someone look green, but in 1938, the only tried-and-true method used by Hollywood makeup artists was copper paint. Copper, of course, is toxic when ingested by humans. This was known back then, but the studio showed no restraint in applying the copper concoction directly to Hamilton's face and hands. Towards the end of production, Hamilton realized that the constant application of the witch's makeup had tinted her skin green, an effect that lingered for months after the job. Wearing the makeup on set was a constant struggle. Once it was on, Hamilton was unable to touch anything without staining it, and required assistance to perform the most basic of tasks. But the day-to-day struggles of the makeup would pale in comparison to the accident she suffered on December 23, 1938. When departing Munchkinland, Hamilton was scripted to exit the scene in a fiery cloud of smoke. The first attempt at the stunt went flawlessly, but director Victor Fleming wanted to get a few extra takes for insurance. On the fourth attempt, the pyrotechnics were ignited too early, causing Hamilton to be engulfed in flames. The accident resulted in second-degree burns on the whole right side of her face. The skin on her right hand was entirely scalded off. But before Hamilton could even receive medical attention, she had to slowly and excruciatingly have the copper makeup removed from her freshly burned skin with rubbing alcohol. Margaret Hamilton would spend the next 6 weeks in the hospital before returning to the set. On her very first day back, she was scheduled for the skywriting scene, another stunt involving pyrotechnics. Hamilton adamantly refused to put herself anywhere near fire again and threatened to walk out of the production right then and there. Since the project was nearing completion at that point, the studio acquiesced, and the scene was completed using Hamilton's stunt double, Betty Danko. While filming that very scene, the smoke pipe underneath the broomstick exploded, and Danko was violently flung from the installation. The explosion was caused by the special effects crew coating the pipe with asbestos, another toxic substance once thought to be an all-purpose wonder material. Asbestos was also used in Ray Bolger's Scarecrow suit as well as the snow in the poppy field scene.
Unusual weather we're having, ain't it?
Betty Danko was hospitalized for 11 days with internal damage from the explosion, as well as a 2-inch deep gash on her leg, a wound that would never fully heal. It was a hefty toll for a gig in which she earned just over $800. The long-term health effects on Margaret Hamilton were far less known. What is known is that she would go on to develop Alzheimer's later in her life, a condition that has been linked to copper poisoning. In total, 6 performers on The Wizard of Oz faced some kind of serious physical trauma. Not even Toto left the set intact. However, after enough time had passed, many of the actors could look back on the whole ordeal as a bunch of amusing war stories. Most physical ailments are only temporary. Mental ailments, on the other hand, tend to stick with you for life. And out of everyone in the Land of Oz, perhaps none suffered a worse fate than the star of the show, Judy Garland. She was without a doubt one of the most talented performers of the 20th century. Her portrayal of Dorothy in The Wizard of Oz has served as an enduring symbol of youth and innocence. And even though she was never imprisoned by a brutal costume like the other actors, the studio paid no less scrutiny to her appearance. Since the character of Dorothy was envisioned as a prepubescent girl, the then 17-year-old Garland had to constantly wear a tight corset to hide her more mature figure. But that was merely one aspect of the studio's efforts to keep Judy thin. Garland was placed on a shoestring diet, one that would not provide her with enough energy to complete the arduous filming days. To compensate, the studio kept Garland on a steady intake of amphetamines to keep her working long into the day. The amphetamines subsequently necessitated the use of barbiturates to prevent Garland from exhausting herself. Years later, she claimed that during some periods she would only sleep 4 hours every 3 days. The fact that she was able to perform as well as she did under these conditions is nothing short of astonishing. By the end of production, Garland was addicted to both drugs, an addiction that would last for the rest of her life. It certainly didn't help that her time as a child star directly contributed to deep-rooted psychological problems. Despite her brilliance as a performer, Garland was always encumbered by major esteem issues. The insecurities began when a 14-year-old Garland overheard the MGM executives referring to her as a fat little pig. This moment completely devastated her self-image and manifested itself as an unobtainable standard of perfection that she spent her whole life chasing. And even though she would wind up becoming one of the greatest performers ever, in her mind it was never good enough. In many ways, Judy Garland was the first tragic child star, an archetype that has sadly become much more common in modern times. Clinical psychiatrist John Linden encountered many such patients while practicing in the Los Angeles area. He observed that premature stardom resulted in many child actors forming severe identity issues. They tended to report a feeling of profound emptiness when they weren't performing, as if they were marionettes whose true selves lacked any sort of meaning. The reason so many young stars end up on the downward spiral is that many fail to develop any sense of individual identity. Some attempt to fill this void with sex, drugs, and alcohol, but it's often no match for the constant anxiety of never really understanding who you are. There exists a tragic irony between Judy Garland and Dorothy, a character who wanted nothing more than to find joy and comfort in a wayward world. Unlike Dorothy, however, Judy Garland never made it over the rainbow. On June 22, 1969, Judy Garland was found dead of an overdose on her bathroom floor. She was just 47 years old.
Tragic.
In the years leading up to her death, her increasingly erratic downfall was treated by the media as some sort of morbid spectacle. The American public seemed unable to reconcile how she could have possibly been anyone other than the innocent farm girl from Kansas.
How could this happen? I wonder why.
Hollywood has the remarkable ability to make the wildest parts of our imagination come to life. But the magic of crafting immersive fantasies comes with a very real dark side. Oftentimes it's easy for studios to lose sight of the real-life human beings at their disposal and to end up treating them as, well, marionettes. It would be easy to look back at all the trauma from The Wizard of Oz and chalk it up to a product of its time. Back then, studios could just get away with all of it because if any actor fought back, they would be blacklisted from the industry. But still, even after the studio's iron grip over the industry was broken and actors gained more leverage over their careers, it would be naive to suggest that much has changed in Hollywood. The inner workings of the film industry have always been an enigma. The history of Hollywood is smeared with talented people guilty of terrible things. Very rarely do we ever get to discover what truly goes on behind the big green curtain. Out of every scandal that does come to light, we can only imagine what remains in the dark. In the business of telling the biggest stories possible, the smaller stories often get left behind. For 22 weeks in 1938 and 1939, 6 of Hollywood's most talented actors were practically tortured, with many of them experiencing long-lasting and permanent damage to their bodies and minds. The result was one of the single greatest artistic works of the 20th century. The Wizard of Oz was the defining career achievement for every single person who worked on it. Their suffering had directly contributed to the most beloved film of a generation. It's tempting to dismiss everything you've heard today as an exploitative cash grab from greedy media tyrants. But for MGM, it was never that simple. In 1939, MGM released 41 films in total, premiering a new movie once every 9 days on average. At this time, the studio had no shortage of revenue. What they coveted instead was prestige. Every year, MGM would earmark one production as their prestige film. A project that was never intended to turn a profit, but one that existed for the simple purpose of flexing the cinematic might of the studio. From its very conception, The Wizard of Oz was designed as a monument to the single most dominant empire in the history of the film industry. 35 years after the film's release, toy executive Marty Abrams was conducting market research on local children and found that 80% recognized the characters of Oz. Today, memorabilia attached to these characters now sell for millions at auction. Over the years, the performers who brought these characters to life have gradually faded from public memory. Their sacrifices ultimately forgotten. Dorothy, Scarecrow, Tin Man, Cowardly Lion, and the Wicked Witch have managed to outlive them. Such is the ultimate destiny of people in show business. Actors are tragically temporary. Eventually, only the characters remain. Today, it may seem unfathomable that our most popular and celebrated actors will inevitably meet the same fate. But at the end of the day, it is art, not the artist, which stands the test of time. Despite the turmoil suffered by the actors on the set of Oz, one has to wonder if any of them ever regretted it.
And that's The Wizard of Oz and the Dark Side of Hollywood. The Search for D.B. Cooper. Deal, 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 you can be a little seal. You can buy Little Caesars if you are full of zeal. I don't know what to say, we're watching...
Line 727 somewhere between the wheels.
Search was made of the plane immediately. We don't know who he was, where he came from, or where he went. I expect that we'll keep looking until we find him or find out what happened.
Damn, this Peyton Manning guy is pretty good. It's like he won some Super Bowls.
In the afternoon of November the 24th, 1971, a middle-aged man carrying a briefcase walked into Portland International Airport. and purchased a one-way ticket to Seattle, Washington. The man identified himself as Dan Cooper, and along with 36 other passengers and a crew of 6, he soon boarded Northwest Airlines Flight 305.
I get it, but still.
Once aboard, Cooper made himself comfortable in the middle of the last row of seats on the right side of the cabin. He ordered a drink and had a smoke, because this was the 70s.
Right.
Once the flight was cleared for departure, Cooper turned around and handed an envelope to Flight Attendant Lawrence Schaffner. Inside the envelope was a note featuring a handwritten message stating he had a bomb. Schaffner reluctantly sat down beside him and glimpsed what appeared to be 8 sticks of dynamite inside his briefcase.
Okay, fuck you, I'm going for...
Cooper's demands were quite simple. He wanted $200,000 in cash and 4 parachutes. He also demanded a fuel truck to stand ready to refuel the aircraft once they landed in Seattle. Should they fail to comply with his demands, he threatened to, quote, do the job. Once the flight was airborne, Schaffner went to inform the cockpit crew, while another flight attendant by the name of Tina Mucklow remained by Cooper's side. By using a telephone in the rear of the cabin, Mucklow acted as an intermediary between Cooper and the rest of the flight crew for the remainder of the hijacking. For the next hour and a half, Flight 305 maintained a holding pattern near Seattle, while local and federal authorities scrambled to procure the from a local bank, while the owner of a nearby skydiving school supplied the chute.
Or maybe we do. We're
At 5:45 p.m., more than 2 hours past its scheduled arrival, Flight 305 finally touched down in Seattle.
So don't get used to this.
By this point, it was well after sunset, and the aircraft was brought to a remote section of the tarmac. Once the flight came to a stop, both the ransom and the parachutes were handed over to Mucklow, who then brought them back aboard. In exchange, Cooper permitted 2 of the flight attendants, as well as all the passengers, to disembark, many of whom had not yet realized the flight had been hijacked. With the ransom paid and only 4 crew members remaining on board, Cooper told Mucklow to inform the captain that he wanted to fly to Mexico City. They were to fly with the landing gear down, the flaps at 15 degrees and below 10,000 feet. The lights in the cabin were to be switched off, and the aft stairway, which opened from the underbelly of the fuselage, was to remain extended. 2 of Cooper's demands could not be satisfied. First of all, the flight configuration he'd requested would not allow for a non-stop flight to Mexico City. As such, Cooper proposed a refueling stop in Phoenix, Yuma, or Sacramento before they all agreed on Reno, Nevada. Second of all, it was not possible to depart with the ventral staircase extended. Cooper agreed to retract the stairs on the condition that Mucklow remained by his side and taught him how to extend them once the plane was airborne. Parked for nearly 2 hours due to complications with refueling, Flight 305 was back in the air by 7:36 p.m. Less than 5 minutes after takeoff, Cooper told Mucklow to head for the cockpit and that from this point onwards he was not to be disturbed. The last time she saw Cooper, he was standing in the middle of the aisle as if though he was preparing to jump. Mucklow joined the rest of the crew, locked the cockpit door behind her, and some 3 hours later, Flight 305 safely landed in Reno. Once the flight came to a stop, the crew carefully ventured into the rear of the cabin, but there was no sign of Cooper nor the bomb. The aft stairway had been extended mid-flight and was slightly damaged upon landing. It seemed there was only one explanation for the hijacker's absence. At some point between Seattle and Reno, Cooper had strapped on a parachute, walked down the stairs, and leaped into the dark of the night.
Omaha! Peyton's throw, bro. Peyton nails that every time. Peyton ain't missing fucking Omaha.
As soon as it became clear that Cooper was no longer on board, dozens of FBI agents converged upon the aircraft, only to discover a disappointing amount of physical evidence. A black clip-on tie, 8 cigarette butts, and 2 of the 4 parachutes were all that Cooper left behind. Evidently, he brought the ransom and briefcase along with him. In interviews conducted on the night of the hijacking, Cooper was described by the crew and passengers as a white male with brown eyes and dark hair. He appeared to be in his mid-40s and wore a dark trench coat, a dark suit, a white shirt, a black tie, and dark shoes. Soon after boarding, he'd also donned a pair of sunglasses. Based on this description, the FBI produced the first of several sketches. Before they could mount a the search, however, the FBI had to figure out when Cooper abandoned the ship. But that was easier said than done. None of the 4 crew members witnessed Cooper jumping from the plane, nor did the pilots and 2 fighter jets which escorted the flight between Seattle and Reno, which is not all too surprising given it was the middle of the night. Although the flight crew did report something odd, the last communication with the hijacker occurred at approximately 8:05 p.m. when the crew used the intercom to offer assistance, which Cooper declined. Within the next 10 minutes, the crew experienced what they described as an oscillation or vibration of the aircraft. At the time, the crew suspected it might have been produced by Cooper's jump, and a subsequent recreation of the hijacking supported that conclusion. Okay, so that took care of the when, but what about the where? While Cooper was very explicit about the flight's configuration and destination, he never specified any kind of route. In fact, Cooper grew so impatient with the slow refueling in Seattle that he dismissed the captain's request to file a flight plan and simply told him to, quote, get the show on the road. As such, the captain chose to fly along an airway known as Victor 23 without any input from Cooper. By using Victor 23 as a guide, authorities estimated the most probable location of the flight at the approximated time of the jump was about 40 kilometers north of Portland. And so, at the break of dawn, the FBI mounted an impressive search operation using helicopters, airplanes, and ground troops. The problem was, even if the estimated bailout point was accurate, Cooper's eventual landing or drop zone was far more difficult to pinpoint. The loosely defined search area covered a vast stretch of mountainous wilderness occluded by a dense forest, so it was truly like finding a needle in a haystack. Apart from the difficult terrain, the search was further complicated by low temperatures and inclement weather, which persisted for days. Despite their best efforts, authorities never managed to find a single trace of Cooper, nor the items he brought along with him.
Ad time.
So for Houston, after the home loss, they rebound with a good road win to get back to 500. And they'll get another road date next week as their opponents will be the Minnesota Vikings. Meanwhile, for Houston, they will fall to 1-1. And they'll get a chance to redeem themselves at home next week. And for Charles Davis and our entire crew, I'm Brandon Gaudin. You've been watching the NFL on EA Sports.
Middleton progress by early direct attention to the children and a complete glitch were quickly at the two make it possible for Cooper to spend money. The airlines and several papers even began votes to could find a note with a matching serial number. In spite of these efforts, no one ever did. That is until nearly a decade later. In early 1980, a young boy named Brian Ingram was building a campfire on a small beach in southern Washington. As he was digging into the sand, Ingram discovered 3 bundles of cash totaling $5,880. Having heard about the infamous skyjacking, Ingram's parents brought the severely degraded bundles to the FBI. The notes were promptly inspected, and sure enough, the serial numbers matched those of the ransom. Once the excitement subsided, however, the money managed to raise far more questions than it answered, the most significant of which was how? How did the money end up so far away from the drop zone? Looking at this map, it might be tempting to think that Cooper simply dropped some of the money, which then fell into the Lewis River. The bundles could then have been carried further downstream by the Columbia River before finally being washed ashore at Tina Bar, which is the name of the beach. Tina Mucklow, Tina Bar. Coincidence? Yeah, coincidence. Anyway, the problem with this idea is that the Columbia River flows in the opposite direction. This has led some, including members of the FBI, to re-evaluate the initial drop zone assessment. For instance, if the drop zone was much further southeast, close to a river called the Washougal River, it is conceivable, albeit improbable, that the money floated all the way down to Tina Bar. Alternatively, the bundles may have simply landed on the beach if the flight path was further to the west. Even so, natural explanations struggle to explain how three independent, potentially free-falling and/or free-floating bundles of cash ended up at the exact same place on the same beach. To complicate matters, sediment from the riverbed was excavated and dumped onto Tina Bar as part of a dredging operation in 1974. And according to one analysis, the money was discovered above this layer of sediment. If true, that would mean the money came to rest at Tina Bar sometime after 1974. But a re-examination of that analysis found that what was believed to be a layer of deposited sediment might actually have been a perfectly natural layer of clay. Not only that, but the sediment was clearly dumped some distance away from where the money was discovered. Furthermore, when Ingram discovered the bundles, the rubber bands which held them together were still intact. This is significant because experiments conducted in 2009 revealed that this brand of rubber bands could not withstand exposure to open air or water for more than a year. So, unless the bundles were somehow protected from the elements, they must have become buried at Tina Bar within a year of the hijacking. The most probable explanation, therefore, seems to be that Cooper or someone else deliberately buried the money. Did Cooper survive and bury the money himself? Did someone else bury the money after stumbling upon Cooper's remains? If there is an explanation which does not require human intervention, it's managed to elude investigators for decades. Suffice it to say, this is a mystery within a mystery. Since Ingram's discovery in 1980, both Tina Bar and the grounds around the Washougal River have been subjected to numerous searches, but to date, there's been no sign of Cooper, nor the rest of the money. From the very beginning, it was assumed by many that Cooper did not survive his daring escape. It would not make for a very thrilling conclusion to this story, but that's the thing about stories.
Yeah.
They're usually far more exciting than reality. While there is no hard evidence for nor against Cooper's survival, the assumption that he fell to his death is not without merit. When Cooper leaped into the darkness, Flight 305 was plowing through a frigid rainstorm at roughly 170 knots, 10,000 feet above southern Washington. The wind was so violent that it ripped out a placard from the aft stairway, which was later recovered in 1978 almost directly below the estimated flight path. To say that Cooper was not dressed for the occasion would be an understatement. The ground beneath him, meanwhile, was obscured by multiple layers of clouds, which likely means that Cooper was non-steerable, meaning he would not have been able to steer his descent towards a specific landing spot, thus precluding any potential coordination with an accomplice stationed on the ground. While Cooper expressed some familiarity with parachutes, his actual competence level is up for debate. It's widely believed that Cooper demanded 2 pairs of parachutes, 2 primary and 2 reserve, to make the authorities believe that he intended to take a hostage. That is precisely what happened, as the FBI contemplated, but eventually decided against sabotaging the chutes, as they did not want to risk the life of an innocent civilian. But in their haste to obtain them, they unintentionally provided Cooper with a non-functional dummy chute intended for training purposes. This mishap seems to have gone unnoticed by Cooper because that dummy chute was one of the 2 missing from the plane. Not only that, but Cooper chose the older and plausible choice. But there are other ways to interpret this information. For instance, it's possible that Cooper used the dummy chute not as a reserve, but as a means to secure the bag of money. In fact, that is precisely what Cooper tried to do with the functional reserve chute. First, he tried to place the money in the chute's canopy before removing some of the suspension lines and wrap them around the bag. Perhaps he used the dummy chute for a similar purpose. And Cooper's decision to use the older primary chute is not necessarily an indication of inexperience. It could also be a sign of familiarity, because the chute he left behind was a civilian luxury chute, while the one he used was a military chute. The argument is that Cooper might have been trained as, say, a paratrooper, and chose the older military chute because that's the one with which he was most familiar. And there is at least one other reason to suspect that Cooper had a military background. While the flight was in a holding pattern near Seattle, Cooper mentioned that the McCord Air Force Base was only 20 minutes away from the Seattle-Tacoma airport. At the time, that was an accurate assessment and might suggest a military background. Apart from the potential military connections, Cooper may even have had links to the Central Intelligence Agency. You see, the type of aircraft which Cooper chose to hijack, a Boeing 727, was also used by the CIA to covertly drop agents and supplies during the Vietnam War, a task for which the Boeing 727 was uniquely qualified due to its distinctive aft stairway. So it's fairly safe to assume that Cooper chose to hijack a Boeing 727 specifically because it provided a relatively safe means of escape. Whether he learned of this from the CIA or came to that conclusion independently is another question. However, the fact that Cooper chose to hijack a flight operated by Northwest Airlines was apparently random chance. When Tina Mucklow asked Cooper about his motives, he responded, "It's not because I have a grudge towards your airline, it's just because I have a grudge." He further clarified that Flight 305 just happened to be in the right place at the right time. Even so, it's clear that Cooper came prepared. He seemed to know a great deal about aircraft and aviation. He appeared to be familiar with the local terrain. He maintained a low profile to avoid a panic. He covered his eyes with a pair of glasses to conceal his identity. He left very little evidence behind, and he demanded 4 parachutes to force the assumption that he was taking a hostage. He was even cunning enough to reclaim the note which he'd initially given to Florence Schaffner. Apart from the name he wrote on his plane ticket, there are no other samples of Cooper's handwriting. But for all his planning and cunning, it seems Cooper did not give enough thought to his eventual escape. Not only did he fail to specify a route, but he was forced to make a last-minute destination change from Mexico City to Reno. He could have demanded more appropriate parachuting equipment like a pair of boots, a helmet, or jumpsuit. He could even have specified the ransom to be delivered in larger denominations to make it lighter and less cumbersome to carry.
True.
Presuming he did survive the fall and made it safely to the ground, he may then have had to make his way through a dense, partially snow-covered forest in nothing but loafers and a trench coat in late November. I get the distinct impression that Cooper's escape was much more of a leap of faith than a carefully executed jump. On the other hand, authorities never received a missing persons report matching the description of Cooper in the wake of the hijacking.
Yeah.
This might suggest that Cooper did survive and that he swiftly and quietly resumed his normal routine. Furthermore, other hijackers have performed similar stunts, and many of them did survive, even if they were quickly apprehended. Finally, the simplest explanation for how 3 bundles of cash ended up at Tina Bar is human intervention. At the end of the day, most of this is based on nothing but supposition. Without any concrete evidence of Cooper's demise, it leaves the door wide open to the far more exciting proposition that he did, in fact, survive.
Yes. Add time. Skippable.
By the time the press got wind of the hijacking, the FBI had already begun to investigate a few potential suspects. Among them was a man in Portland with initials DB and surname Cooper. This Cooper was quickly eliminated as a suspect, but due to a mix-up by the press, the name Dan Cooper was confused for DB Cooper, and the rest is history. While Dan Cooper is most likely a pseudonym, there is a comic book series of the same name. The comic is written in French and centers around a Canadian pilot named Dan Cooper. While the comic was not translated into English nor sold in the United States before 1971, it was available in Canada, which has a large French-speaking population. Given that American and Canadian accents can be difficult to distinguish, it's possible that Cooper, who was described as having no discernible accent, was a bilingual Canadian. This might even be supported by something that Cooper might have said. You see, when the captain relayed Cooper's demands to air traffic control, he used the phrase negotiable American currency. It seems doubtful that an American citizen would specify American currency, so perhaps Cooper was not American. The problem is, we don't know if this is a direct quote from Cooper or paraphrasing by the captain. For instance, notes taken by the crew during the hijacking merely contain the phrase negotiable currency, while testimonies provided by the crew after the hijacking include phrases like $200,000 in cash and circulated US currency. So, Cooper might have been Canadian, and he might have taken his name from the Dan Cooper comics, just as he might have been American, and might have taken his name from something or someone else. Nearly half a century has gone by since the hijacking took place, and in that time, thousands of suspects have been questioned and investigated. It would obviously be impossible to cover all of them here, but let's take a look at some of the people that at some point or another have been suspected of being D.B. Cooper. Robert Rackstraw first became a suspect in 1978, and on the surface, he seems like a solid candidate. He was a decorated Army paratrooper and helicopter pilot. He had experience with explosives. He had an extensive criminal record. He had an uncle named John Cooper who was an avid skydiver. He was expelled from the Army only months before the hijacking, which might suggest a motive. After all, the hijacker did say he had a grudge. When confronted by journalists and private investigators, Rackstraw would neither confirm nor outright deny that he was D.B. Cooper. Instead, he'd say things like, "I could have been," or "I would not discuss myself." On the other hand, Rackstraw had light-colored eyes, which Cooper did not. More significantly, Rackstraw was only 28 years of age at the time of the hijacking. This is well outside the range of ages reported by the crew and passengers, most of whom believe Cooper was in his mid-40s. Kenneth Christensen first became a suspect in 2003 when his brother noticed certain parallels between him and Cooper. Christensen had briefly served as a paratrooper in World War II, and since 1953 he'd worked for Northwest Airlines as both a mechanic and a flight attendant. He was 45 years old at the time of the hijacking. He was left-handed, which Cooper might have been. For instance, Cooper used his left hand to interact with his briefcase, and the clip-on tie he left on board was affixed with a tie clasp applied from the left. Shortly before he died in 1994, Christensen had supposedly told his brother, "There is something you should know, but I cannot tell you." After his passing, his family discovered over $200,000 in his bank accounts. To top it all off, Lawrence Schaffner stated that photographs of Christensen bore a strong resemblance to Cooper. On the other hand, Christensen did not match the physical description of Cooper. He was both shorter and lighter. While Schaffner did see a strong resemblance, she remarked that Cooper had more hair, and that is supported by the composite sketches. And there was nothing suspicious about the large sums of money which he'd simply earned by selling land.
True.
Richard McCoy first became a suspect in 1972 when he hijacked a Boeing 727 and escaped via the aft stairway, much like D.B. Cooper. Because of the significant overlap between the two hijackings, some believe they must have been committed by the same person. McCoy used a fake name, he used a fake hand grenade to threaten the crew, he used handwritten notes to issue his demands. Both McCoy and Cooper used the phrase "no funny stuff" as a warning to the crew. McCoy demanded $500,000 in cash and 4 parachutes. McCoy also bailed out the back of the plane once they passed over his hometown in the state of Utah. Apart from this similar modus operandi, McCoy had also served in the Vietnam War as a demolitions expert and a helicopter pilot. McCoy did actually survive the fall and managed to evade authorities for 2 full days before he was apprehended and sentenced to 45 years in prison. Before his death in 1974, McCoy refused to confirm or deny that he was D.B. Cooper. On the other hand, McCoy was an avid recreational skydiver and even came prepared with a skydiving helmet and jumpsuit. He gave very specific instructions about the flight path. In addition to the fake hand grenade, McCoy also used an unloaded handgun to threaten the crew. He failed to retrieve one of the notes he'd given to a flight attendant. He was only 29 years of age at the time of the hijacking, and all 3 flight attendants were quite certain that McCoy was not Cooper. While there are meaningful parallels between these 2 cases, McCoy might simply have been a copycat who'd read about D.B. Cooper in the news. Dwayne Weber first became a suspect in 1995 when, shortly before his death, he supposedly told his wife, "I've got a secret to tell you. I am Dan Cooper." Following his deathbed confession, Weber's widow recalled a number of passages.
You don't look like D.B.
She
Cooper,
claims
my
they found
guy.
a bank bag resembling the one used in the hijacking. She claims Weber had sustained a knee injury after jumping out of a plane. Weber supposedly had a nightmare about leaving his fingerprints on the aft stairs. And a year before the money was discovered at Tina Bar, Weber had allegedly paid a quick visit to the same location. In addition, Weber was a World War II veteran. He had an extensive criminal record.
Damn it,
He
why
matched
won't
the
it-
physical description, and he was 47 years old in 1971. On the other hand, Weber's fingerprints did not match any of the prints collected from Flight 305. Although, to be fair, there's no way to know if any of those prints actually belonged to Cooper. Furthermore, Weber's DNA did not match the DNA sample collected from the tie class.
I can't
But once again,
believe
there's
we
no way to
drafted
know if the
Peyton
DNA of the tie
Manning.
class
Oh my
actually
God.
came from the hijacker and not
Oh,
someone
I
else.
can't believe we drafted
What's so
Peyton
frustrating
Manning.
is that the FBI likely had a much better source of DNA at one point. If you recall, 8 cigarette butts were collected from the scene, and there's a good chance they were all suffused with Cooper's DNA.
We are
The
watching
problem
the
is
search for D.B.
that evidence was lost at some point and has not turned up since.
Have a good day.
William Smith first became a suspect in 2018. Smith served in the Navy during World War II and likely had some experience with parachuting. He was 43 years old at the time of the hijacking. He had dark brown eyes.
We're watching the
He
search for
matched the
D.B.
physical
Cooper.
description.
We're going to be watching
He
a
shared a
bunch of
certain
different
likeness with the
videos.
composite sketches, especially this speculative
We're
sketch of
winning.
an
We
older
drafted
D.B.
Peyton
Cooper.
Manning.
A student named Ira Daniel Cooper, who was killed in World War II, attended the same high school as Smith. Smith worked as a yardmaster for a railroad company for most of his life, but in 1970 the company filed for bankruptcy. As a consequence, Smith lost his pension, which might suggest a motive. He could, for instance, have developed a grudge towards the airline industry for their role in bringing about the downfall of the rail transportation industry. It's further speculated that Smith could have used his knowledge of railroad networks to hop on a train and escape undetected. On the other hand, Smith spent his entire life in the northeastern United States. Given that the hijacking occurred on the other side of the country and was committed by someone who at least appeared to be familiar with the local terrain, Smith is not the most ideal candidate.
Oh, got a
However,
text
the
message.
fact that Smith worked as a yardmaster is interesting. You see, the tie that Cooper left behind was recently examined using an electron microscope, which uncovered various metallic particles.
Thanks for tuning
Some
in.
of these particles, especially pure titanium,
I've been
were
streaming for
quite
about
rare
3
in
hours.
1971. This might suggest that Cooper worked as a manager at some sort of chemical or metallurgical facility, or possibly a rail yard.
Oh, is it going to play an ad?
If nothing else, I hope this limited selection of suspects illustrates just how difficult it is to be certain when you have so little evidence to work
so
with.
don't worry, you
These
don't have to
5
watch
individuals
ads,
look
people.
nothing alike,
We don't play
yet
ads.
any one of them could
Obviously.
be D.B. Cooper. Was
Oh, here we
Cooper
go, here we
really
go,
in
here
his
we go. Let's go, let's
mid-40s,
go, let's go,
or did he
let's go,
simply
let's
look
go,
old for his
boom,
age?
boom, boom, boom,
Did Cooper
boom,
really
touchdown,
serve in the
baby.
military?
That's what I'm
Which
talking
one
about.
of these sketches most closely resemble Cooper? In 2016, the FBI had to admit defeat
They never
and
caught
officially
D.B.
closed down the
Cooper.
case.
D.B. Cooper
Unless someone stumbles
is one
upon
of the
Cooper's
most
remains
legendary
or
cold cases
manages
to
to
this
track
day.
down the rest of the money, it seems there is little hope of resolution. Did Cooper survive? I have no idea.
Probably
But
not.
as long as that possibility cannot be dismissed, the legend of D.B. Cooper will no doubt persist.
That was The Search for D.B. Cooper by Lemino. I think the verses you did for the song were freaking awesome, Travis. Like I said, I'm going to add my voice to The Bird is the Word, so we can have like 3 vocals to it. Up next is There Will Never Ever Be Another Cartoon Like SpongeBob SquarePants. Skip. I said skip.
You know, the average American probably can't tell you who lives in 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue.
Hello, Mr. Donald Trump. I am here to inform you that I am placing you under citizen's arrest. What are you, morons?
But what they probably can tell you is who lives in a pineapple under the sea. SpongeBob SquarePants is the most popular cartoon of my generation.
Technical
and
difficulty
nothing
real
else
quick.
really even comes close. challenge. Try scrolling through your typical social media feeds and see how long you can go without seeing anything SpongeBob related.
I gotta find another video after this.
You may find that it's pretty difficult because SpongeBob is absolutely everywhere. People post SpongeBob pictures from Tumblr to 4chan and everywhere in between. And even more impressively, almost all of the SpongeBob related references, memes, and reaction images you see are based on the first 3 seasons of the series, a stretch of about 120 episodes that most people would classify as the golden age of SpongeBob. If you look at Nickelodeon's programming schedule today, SpongeBob SquarePants, a 19-year-old cartoon, still receives more airtime than any other show on the network. To put that in perspective, Futurama came out the same year as SpongeBob, and since then, it ran for 4 seasons on Fox until it was canceled, and then acquired by Cartoon Network where it aired as reruns on Adult Swim for 3 years. Then, starting in 2006, the series released 4 direct-to-DVD movies until 2010, when Comedy Central aired the series for 2 more seasons until it got canceled for the final time in 2013. That is until 2014, when Futurama returned to Fox for a one-time crossover episode with The Simpsons. And since that point, the series has continued to air as reruns on Comedy Central and now Sci-Fi. And during that whole journey, over all that time, SpongeBob has been continually broadcast on Nickelodeon. If you compare SpongeBob to other children's cartoons released during the same time, nothing even comes close to its longevity. Rocket Power came out the same year as SpongeBob on Nickelodeon. And it aged about as well as Polio. Even historically good cartoons from around the same time as SpongeBob, like Powerpuff Girls, Ed, Edd n Eddy, Jimmy Neutron, all these cartoons were off the air by 2010, but not SpongeBob. And it should be no surprise why Nickelodeon still airs SpongeBob as much as they do. Since SpongeBob premiered in 1999, the show has generated over $13 billion in revenue from merchandising alone. And considering Viacom, Nickelodeon's parent company, earns about $13 billion of revenue per year, you can infer that SpongeBob alone has accounted for at least 5% of Viacom's total revenue since 1999. Keep in mind, that's not just 5% of Nickelodeon's revenue. That's 5% of the total revenue from every media property Viacom owns. So you're damn right they're going to keep airing SpongeBob for as long as they're in business. SpongeBob just keeps going, and for as long as I can remember, SpongeBob has always been popular. Everyone watched SpongeBob when I was growing up in elementary school, and as everyone got older and past the age when most people grow out of watching cartoons, SpongeBob always seemed to stick around.
Way too much
you were
money.
never too old to make a SpongeBob joke. Even during SpongeBob's later seasons,
that's basically the gist of this video.
It never really grew stale for me because I transitioned to watching YouTube proofs of old SpongeBob episodes.
Listen, SpongeBob, fuck you.
The first video in the history of my channel to reach 1,000 views was a SpongeBob YouTube poop. You could argue that the first 3.5 years of this...
One of my most popular videos is a SpongeBob edit. So, like... I can't really say too much, you know what I mean? Like, yeah, people fucking love SpongeBob, it's never gonna end.
YouTube channel were built almost entirely from the popularity of me remixing episodes of SpongeBob. Even today, new SpongeBob YouTube poops continue to garner hundreds of thousands of views, and extending beyond YTP, SpongeBob has become almost synonymous with meme culture on the internet today. From vines to reaction images to portrayed by SpongeBob, SpongeBob is, by far, the most popular cartoon character of this millennium. He has reached a status on par with the likes of Mickey Mouse, Bugs Bunny, and Homer Simpson. But by many measures, SpongeBob is a more relevant character than any of them. Characters like Mickey Mouse are superficially popular due to branding and marketing. Kids today are certainly not watching Mickey Mouse cartoons or sharing Mickey Mouse memes, and the character has almost completely receded into the role of a corporate mascot.
Principal Skinner, the happiest place on earth is a registered Disneyland copyright.
No.
And it's heading for a great big lawsuit. You made a big mistake, Skinner.
Well, so did you. You've got an excuse for a man. I spent the next 3 years in a POW camp.
Characters like Homer Simpson are certainly iconic. However, they exist more as relics of a bygone era. Unlike Mickey Mouse, The Simpsons grew organically in popularity and became one of the most essential cultural elements of the 1990s.
Quality schmality. If I had a TV show, I'd run that sucker into the ground.
But it's 2018 now, and The Simpsons is not exactly the most cutting-edge programming anymore. Homer's legacy has already been decided, and the character has nothing new to bring to the table. SpongeBob not only rose to fame organically, but it continues to grow and evolve within our culture 19 years later.
Don't miss next newest Snake Joke. It's the never-before-seen sneak peek of SpongeBob SquarePants, right after the Kids' Choice Awards. Tonight on the...
Now when you think of the new millennium, you think of an event so gigantic that it changes the course of history. You think of a dawning of a new era.
Here's to another lousy millennium.
Downward spiral.
The term millennial gets thrown around a lot these days, and I don't really buy it. I think it's just a slippery blanket term invented by 40-year-old marketing people to describe young people who know how to use the internet. We're the first generation to have access to unlimited information. We don't fall for the same marketing tricks that corporations used on our parents, and companies can never figure out what we like because we don't know what we like. Actually, that's not exactly true. We know one thing we like, and that's SpongeBob. SpongeBob has somehow managed to become the most quintessential entertainment property among young people. This one show was able to crack the code of the most complex generation in history. In the entertainment industry, companies have invested millions in trying to come up with a character like SpongeBob. Every media company wants a SpongeBob, a character that becomes so popular that it practically prints money for the network. And ironically, SpongeBob wasn't created by a corporate think tank. He wasn't created by a fleet of overpaid marketing, public relations, and diversity specialists.
That was
the
a
most
close
popular
game.
children's cartoon of the 21st century was created by a marine biologist.
I actually, for a while, studied marine science before animation. So when I started to think, well, if I were to do an animal show, what would I do? Not one about bunnies or dogs and cats. It would be about these sea animals that I really like, and somehow all that information sort of collided into one thing, SpongeBob.
But have you ever wondered why SpongeBob is so popular? You're probably thinking it's the humor.
After this, we're going to watch
every
the
reference
Blood
to
Meridian
SpongeBob
video
today
by
exists within the context of comedy.
It is a 5-hour-long video, so if you
SpongeBob
all
has
have
so many
time,
funny scenes that you could probably quote word for word. The style of comedy is just so random and zany and unexpected.
If you've never seen it before.
So is SpongeBob's humor really that much better than every other show? Well, no, not really, actually. Plenty of cartoons have a similar style of pacing and comedy, and they aren't nearly as popular. Maybe you could argue that SpongeBob invented this style, and similar cartoons aren't as popular because the audience sees them as discount knockoffs. But even if that were true, the difference in popularity between something like The Simpsons and Family Guy is far less than the difference between SpongeBob and a show like Chowder. Something else is definitely going on here. So what exactly makes SpongeBob stick out so much from other cartoons? What makes SpongeBob so memorable? What makes SpongeBob click? Well, to find out, I decided to watch some old episodes. I couldn't quite figure it out until I saw this one scene from one episode. Then, suddenly, it all made sense. But before I get into what I discovered, let me first preface it with a simple question. Who is the most important character in SpongeBob? Now, you're probably looking at that and thinking, no shrimp, barnacle head. It's the character whose name is the title of the show. And yes, obviously SpongeBob is the face of SpongeBob, but is he really the most important character? Sure, he's an energetic and optimistic protagonist, but then again, so were a dozen other cartoon characters from the 2000s. SpongeBob alone wasn't enough to carry a show to transcendent popularity, so who was? Maybe you're thinking it's Patrick, and his hilariously idiotic quotes and moments.
You got it set to M for mini, when it should be set to W for Wumbo.
But once again, the dim-witted best friend character has showed up in a ton of other cartoons before and after SpongeBob, so Patrick is nothing special. Maybe you're thinking Mr. Krabs is the most important character, and how his ruthless penny-pitching greed is a brilliant commentary on how massive corporations are suffocating American society.
The gentle laborer shall no longer suffer from the noxious greed of Mr. Krabs. We will dismantle oppression board by board. We'll saw the foundation of big business in half. We will send the hammer of the people's will crashing through the windows of Mr. Krabs' house of servitude.
But to be fair, you have to have a very high IQ to understand the deep anti-capitalistic themes of SpongeBob SquarePants. So Mr. Krabs probably isn't the character that gives the show the widest appeal. No. The most important character of SpongeBob isn't Mr. Krabs, Patrick, or even SpongeBob. The character that single-handedly makes SpongeBob work is Squidward Q Tentacles. And it might not be obvious why, but when I watched this one very simple scene from the episode Dying for Pie, all the pieces of the puzzle suddenly came together. This short, basic clip with no dialogue represents precisely why SpongeBob is such a popular show.
Oh, my bad.
When I watched this scene as a kid, I was SpongeBob. But when I watch this scene today, I'm Squidward. You see, for kids that grew up watching SpongeBob, this show acts as a link, a connection, a time warp between our past and present selves. When we were kids, we all acted like SpongeBob. We were joyful, naive, enthusiastic, optimistic. Everything we did seemed like a new fun adventure. Then, somewhere along the way, almost everyone turns into Squidward. Bland, cynical, pessimistic, trapped in the monotonous, never-ending routine of adult life.
In case you've forgotten, here's how things work. I order the food, you cook the food, then the customer gets the food. We do that for 40 years, and then we die.
What?
The food. We do that for 40 years, and then we die.
Get back to work, Mr. Squidward.
Really break the backs of the defense.
SpongeBob and Squidward represent a balanced dichotomy between the innocence of childhood and the cynicism of adulthood. Just think about Squidward's life in the show. It sure sucks, doesn't it? He works a minimum wage job as a cashier. He tries to find happiness in his only true passion of art and music, maintaining a sliver of hope that one day he can quit his job at the Krusty Krab to become a commercially successful artist. But his lack of talent can only produce works that are mediocre at best. Society rejects his efforts. He's told time and time again that his passion projects are no good, leaving him doomed to toil in a dead-end career of fast food service. He believes he's better than everyone else, yet there he is, stuck in the same pen as the rest of the simpletons. He has abandoned his dreams. He knows he's not good enough.
There's SpongeBob
Life
right
has
along with
defeated
him, though.
leaving him to stew
like
in bitter
SpongeBob.
contempt at how society has dealt him an
Don't
unfair
be Squidward.
hand. Now tell me, does that description not represent almost every young adult of this generation?
Squidward's
But
a
a visit to
doomer.
the Krusty
But
Krab makes
SpongeBob
everyone
is an
happy.
opposite
And what could be better than serving up smiles?
Being dead.
It seems like most of us wish we could go back to being like SpongeBob.
But do we really? If you strip away the bright colors, the wacky underwater setting, and all the weird anthropomorphic fish people, SpongeBob's life is just as depressing as Squidward's. He works the same dead-end job at the same fast food restaurant. He, too, has a passionate hobby that gets rejected by society.
My favorite episode
no one
is
respects
the one where they go
He's
on the
not
panty
tough.
raid.
He's not strong. He's not cool. He can't pass his driver's
Are you
license
feeling
test
it
no
now,
matter
Mr.
how many
Krabs?
times he tries. SpongeBob's life is just as depressing as anybody else's. And yet, through all of that, he keeps his chin up and keeps on trying. SpongeBob is the anti-Squidward, and Squidward is the anti-SpongeBob. And their conflict is the essential thematic clash of not just the show, but the lives of the audience watching the show. Some of the best and most memorable SpongeBob episodes of all time are the ones where SpongeBob and Squidward are involved in the same adventure. Let's look at Idiot Box, where SpongeBob is able to derive more entertainment from a cardboard box than Squidward can from the television that accompanies it. Eventually, Squidward unlocks the same enjoyment by learning to use his imagination. If you look at the plots of many SpongeBob episodes involving SpongeBob and Squidward, you'll start to notice a pattern. Squidward and SpongeBob have to do some common tasks. Squidward's cynicism clashes with SpongeBob's enthusiasm until ultimately, SpongeBob's childlike optimism wins out, and Squidward gets to experience a rare moment of genuine happiness, only for his misery to quickly reset for future episodes.
Yes.
But what about when the opposite happens? When SpongeBob experiences a rare moment of sadness? Well, that happens in one of the most classic and popular episodes of all time, Pizza Delivery. It starts off as a typical SpongeBob and Squidward episode, with SpongeBob's optimistic spirit overcoming adversity and dragging Squidward along a marathon delivery route. For the whole journey, Squidward wants to quit. He doubts SpongeBob time and time again and even tries to sabotage the delivery at one point. And yet, despite all of this, SpongeBob's antiquated survival guide manages to miraculously bring them to their destination. And then, after all that effort, this piece of fat slams the door in SpongeBob's face. This goddamn barnacle head is the most despicable villain in the history of fictional characters. A character so hated that they never ever brought him back. This guy should serve as a permanent reminder that you should never act this way to anyone who works in food service. Their lives are bad enough. But anyway, this barnacle head gives SpongeBob such a brutal dose of reality that it completely shatters his naive, optimistic bubble. And we get a rare moment where SpongeBob is genuinely dejected. This prompts one of the most memorable scenes in the whole series when Squidward puts his cynicism aside and sticks up for his friend. It's a truly gratifying and heartwarming moment, and it really makes you wonder about the true depth of Squidward's character. Once again, if you really pay attention to some of these SpongeBob episodes, you'll start to notice that Squidward often learns a lesson or changes its attitude. In many cases, Squidward is as much of a protagonist as SpongeBob. This idea gets fully realized in Band Geeks, an episode that many fans regard as the greatest SpongeBob episode ever. This is an episode that hands Squidward the reins, finally gets an opportunity to follow his dream and make it big as a successful artist. And just like every other one of his attempts at chasing his aspirations, it begins to look like a complete failure. But then, just when all hope seems lost, SpongeBob helps the entire town band together and they deliver the best musical performance in the history of the Bubble Bowl. And in the end, Squidward is hoisted into the air, triumphant at last, finally achieving his dream of becoming a successful artist. I don't care how long the series lasts or whatever the final episode is, because this moment right here is the true spiritual series finale of SpongeBob SquarePants.
Yes.
And in my humble opinion, it's the most iconic moment in the history of the series.
I have not seen this video before.
But why should we care about any of this?
I haven't.
SpongeBob isn't real.
I've watched M. Lemon videos before, but I have not seen this video.
Nothing about SpongeBob is real. And at the end of the day, SpongeBob is just a series of colorful images strung together for 11 minutes a pop. A TV show that hasn't even been good since 2004. But that's the thing, though. Why did SpongeBob stop being good? Why do all of the show's most memorable moments seem to only come from those vaunted first 3 seasons? For most fans, everything else has been simply mediocre. Numerous essays have been produced attempting to explain SpongeBob's decline in quality from season 4 onward, citing reasons from creator Steven Hillenburg's departure to production changes to creative burnout. All of these explanations seem to have one thing in common. They all have a shared sense that new SpongeBob is missing something. And for me, that thing is the essential dichotomy between SpongeBob and Squidward. In the early seasons, SpongeBob was an adult with childlike qualities. However, if you pay attention to his characterization in later seasons, he's basically just a child. Squidward hasn't changed that much, but it doesn't matter, because simply changing SpongeBob was enough to throw their entire character dynamic out of whack. SpongeBob and Squidward used to be foils. They were both just a couple of dudes in the same crappy situation, but their outlook of that situation is what made them distinct. The comedy and fun of SpongeBob came from how SpongeBob and Squidward saw the world differently. And when you take SpongeBob and turn him into a brainless child who cries over McDonald's toys, you completely destroy this balance. You no longer have a dichotomy of perspectives towards adult life. All you have at this point is Squidward basically babysitting kid SpongeBob for 11 minutes. Rather than having SpongeBob act as a foil for Squidward, you make may have worked for Bugs Bunny and Elmer Fudd, but it's just not the kind of stuff that made us love SpongeBob. And yeah, obviously there's more to SpongeBob than just SpongeBob and Squidward, but the same theme applies to basically everything that's wrong with the later seasons of the show. SpongeBob started off as something truly unique and special, and in just a few seasons they turned it into just another cartoon for children. The reason SpongeBob became mediocre was because they removed the spirit of what connected the show to adults. And sure, the later seasons of SpongeBob aren't that good, but you shouldn't let that detract from what the show managed to accomplish during those first magical 120 episodes.
Yeah, they got a whole
There are millions of people
made.
out there who grew up watching SpongeBob and are in their 20s now. People who probably stopped watching cartoons over a decade ago, but still get a kick out of SpongeBob references. SpongeBob managed to define an entire generation, and there are very few other television shows that can make that claim. I don't think there's a single other show that truly captures the essence of whatever a millennial is. A generation who has been raised with dreams of grandeur only to fall into a wasteland of mediocrity. A collection of young adults who desperately want to believe that they're unique, that they're talented, that they matter, despite finding themselves wasting away in a dead-end job lining the pockets of some rich a-hole. The sad reality is that most of the people my age are a generation of Squidwards. People who feel like they deserve better. People who feel like society has inhibited them from fulfilling their true potential. People who have grown cynical and jaded and depressed because they believe that the world has screwed them.
Yes,
but I don't see why it has to be that way. I don't see why people can't try to be more like SpongeBob. I think when we grow up, a lot of us are so desperate to act older and be mature and cool and edgy. But I think somewhere along the way, a lot of us lose sight of something important. We are all born with an inherent sense of childlike wonder. When we're kids, everything is just so much more interesting. We're naturally curious. We're eager to discover the world and interact with it. We have hyperactive imaginations. We draw pictures, we write stories, we create things that have intrinsic value to us because we take satisfaction in creating them. And eventually, there comes a time when we just stop. The world stops being fun. We stop exploring. We stop imagining. Everything becomes dull and repetitive and uninspired. But why do we do this to ourselves? We suddenly jettison our capacity for creativity and imagination. And for what? To fit in better with other sad, boring adults? I bet that everybody watching this can remember a moment in their lives when someone has told you to grow up and made you feel ashamed for acting even the least bit childish. It's all too common for our society to stigmatize people who demonstrate signs of immaturity. But as far as I'm concerned, as long as you're a good person and you pull your own weight, what difference does it make if you occasionally act like a kid? Being an adult blows. You have taxes, insurance, rent payments, lawn care, litigation, hair loss, weight gain, erectile dysfunction, and on top of all of that, you're expected to be boring too. So excuse me if I'm unwilling to abandon my childlike sense of wonderment in exchange for those fantastic perks. You shouldn't have to buy into this nebulous perceived notion of maturity. As a matter of fact, most people don't buy into it if they're being honest with themselves. When you look at the comments of any YouTube video about something more than 5 years old, you'll see people nostalgically fawning about the good old days. It turns out everyone's in a race to grow up until they finally get to be grown-ups. Then, all of a sudden, they want to be young again. Some of these people have such a strong desire to return to the past because they feel like everything has changed for the worse. When realistically, the world hasn't changed for the worse. Your outlook has. You've become a Squidward. And remember, no one wants to be a Squidward. And everyone should want to be more like SpongeBob. I don't care if you're the most jaded, cynical, edgy dude on the planet. You should still try to be like SpongeBob, because SpongeBob has something that the Squidwards of the world will never have.
Hope.
And that's genuine happiness. I guess what I'm trying to say with all of this is that you only get to be a kid for so long.
Same thing.
Enjoy it. And even if you think you're too old, you shouldn't let that stop yourself from enjoying the same stuff you did when you were a kid. You shouldn't worry about those people telling you to act your age, because that's just another way of telling you to be boring. So don't be boring. Go out and have some fun like a kid. Draw a picture, write a story, sing a song, watch some cartoons. And if you happen to watch one about a talking sponge who lives in a pineapple under the sea, you can stop and appreciate it, because there will never ever be another cartoon like it.
It's not about winning, it's about fun.
New DraftKings casino players.
Ew! Ads. Yucky. And now we try and watch now the main event. Bear with us. This is a 5-hour-long video. So strap in, folks. I hope you're ready. This is the greatest terrible book ever made. The story too disturbing to be a movie. Blood Meridian.
The story that we are going to be talking about today is one of the most incredible and terrible stories that I have ever read. It is said by many to be one of the greatest, if not the greatest, American novel ever written.
I gotta go to my parents' house and get my books
to be
back.
one of the most brutal and evil things ever put to paper. And as someone who has read the story a few times at this point, I have to agree with both sides. That story that we are going to be talking about today is the few stories that I read that I can definitively say change the way I look at storytelling or at narratives as a whole. And this book is certainly one of them. Now, of course, I am a little biased. Cormac's two most famous stories, No Country for Old Men and The Road, are among my favorite stories ever written. So, as a fan of the author, I went into Blood Meridian hopeful. And after reading it, I think this just might be his masterpiece.
Oh, yeah.
Now, a lot of you might have heard of Blood Meridian, not from its history as a novel, but its history as a film adaptation, or more specifically, the lack thereof. Blood Meridian has officially been put forward as a film on 4 separate occasions, some of them having names like Martin Scorsese and Tommy Lee Jones attached. And despite that, the film has never got out of pre-production, most of the time because production companies find the contents of the novel far too disturbing and graphic to be adapted to film. And as mentioned earlier, I see where they're coming from. A lot of the stuff in here would be a massive risk to ever put to screen. But with that being said, if you're someone who values story and literature, especially American literature, this is a story you really shouldn't miss out on. And that brings us to today. What I want to do is go through the story of Blood Meridian, as I do with a lot of literature topics in these videos, and talk about the characters, events, and themes as they occur within the story. And as we read the book and analyze it together, I want to get across to you all why this is such an important and brutal story. So before we start, I have a couple disclaimers. For one, if you read any literature, or more specifically disturbing literature, and I'll talk about the specific
before you watch
contents
this
of the book in a
video.
moment, and if you're okay with those contents, then I want you to stop watching this video right now, find Blood Meridian, ebook, I don't care.
Read it.
And immediately listen to this story as it was originally told.
It's so
I
good.
Would hate to rob you
I would
of
hate
experiencing
to spoil this story for you.
Written.